Well, welcome everybody. I apologize for not being on the Teams, but for some reason can't get my computer to work. So let me call the meeting to order and ask Mike to do a roll call, please.
I will do so. First of order, Mike Alley, and I am present. Dennis Bland. Okay. John Costas.
Present.
I see John, yeah. Trent Egbert.
Present.
Thank you. Judd Fisher.
Present.
Al Hubbard, I've heard, so I know you're there. Chris Lamoth. Okay, I see Chris Murphy, so you're there.
Yep.
Dan Peterson.
I am here as well.
All right. Bev Pitts, I have seen.
I am here.
Knows here. And John Pop, I think you're out there, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And Alfonso Vidal.
I'm here.
Okay, very good. So once again, we'll keep an eye out for Dennis and Chris Lamoth when they arrive. But we do have a quorum, so that's our attendance as it stands right now.
Terrific. Thanks, Mike. And again, welcome everyone. I know we would all much prefer to have this pandemic behind us and be in Terre Haute at Indiana State today, but unfortunately, that's not the situation. But hopefully everyone's healthy, and it's good to see the country starting to open up and the economy to start opening up. I think President Deborah Curtis is with us. Are you with us?
I am, sir. I am here.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let me give you an opportunity to say a few words to us. And again, we're sorry we're not able to take advantage of your hospitality and join you at your wonderful institution.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm just here to bring you greetings and say we really wish you could be here with us today. It's a beautiful day in Terre Haute on our beautiful campus. And I just wanted to start these remarks to you with something that I often say when I'm talking to individuals that represent the state of Indiana. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your support of public higher education in this state. Some of you have heard me say before, my higher ed path has taken me through Illinois and Missouri and then back home here to Indiana. And I have to tell you, Indiana is by far the best support of public higher education that I have experienced. So thank you, and I truly mean it every time I say that. I know you've got a full agenda. I just wanted to quickly share with you one more time what we consider to be the strongest piece of Indiana State's message is our value proposition. One element of it is the high quality programs we have. Our students enjoy nationally accredited programs taught by 75% of their courses by fully terminal certified faculty. Second element, affordability. ISU is the most affordable of the 4 statewide public universities. And I want you to know, we work really hard to maintain that role. And then third, our outcomes. We survey our grads every year, 6 months after graduation. So I have for you the class of 2019's data, and it's 99% either employed in their field, in the military, or in graduate school. It's the best number we've ever had. So we really believe that sends the message of who we are and what we do. I need to take a little personal point here to say I have to just sing the praises of Commissioner Lubbers. I've been engaging with her with the Attainment Academy work representing the state of Indiana on our team. And I think you know that, but I need to say it one more time. Commissioner Lubbers is so well respected around the country, and she has kept Indiana at the forefront of this work. So I'm just really honored to serve with her. I want you to know I'm looking forward to making my budget presentation to you later this year. And know that Indiana State University is truly your partner for our state as our people navigate these very rocky waters through strength and resilience. And we tell you, we come committed to that as well. So we will see you very soon. Thanks for letting me say a few words today.
Well, thank you. And thanks for your generous offer of hospitality, and thanks for the important job that Indiana State does in our state. I know you particularly are focused on first generation students, and that is so important to our state and our economy and our people. I think everyone remembers that unfortunately Colleen's term has expired, and she unfortunately could not be with us today. She was supposed to be in New York City, but before the pandemic hit. But she is, if I remember correctly, working for Anthem this summer, and I know she has expressed a number of times how much she enjoyed working, participating on the commission, and I know we all agree that she made a very, very big positive impact on our jobs as with a higher ed commission. And then unfortunately Alfonso, his wife got this big job as chancellor of the Ivy Tech Community College in Evansville, and so that requires him to drop off. And I know we're all going to very much miss having Alfonso on the commission, and there've been a series of back and forth of everyone expressing their appreciation for and enjoyment for his participation on the commission. So anyway, they've been great contributors, and I know we're all going to miss them. We have a resolution honoring Colleen, and Mike, can you please read that?
I'd be delighted to do so. Also, I do want to note also, I note that Dennis Bland and Chris Lamoth have joined us, so we do have all of our members in attendance. But I'm very pleased to read two resolutions, one for Colleen and the other for Alfonso. First, Colleen. Whereas Colleen served with distinction on the Indiana Commission for Higher Education since her appointment as student representative in 2018, and she has actively been involved in the development of the Commission's 2000 through 2021 biennial budget recommendation, and whereas her thoughtful participation in the development of the Commission's new strategic plan contributed to the visionary nature of reaching higher in a state of change, and whereas her valuable contribution as a welcoming speaker at the 2019 Students Advocates Conference unquestionably made that event successful by providing attendees with a student-centric perspective on a range of issues. And whereas Colleen was an active participant in the Commission's signature annual H. Kent Weldon Conference in 2019, and whereas she made valued and strong contributions during her service on the Student Success and Completion Committee, and whereas Colleen was fully engaged in advancing the work of the Commission through her insightful questions and analytical comments on a range of topics which certainly included, but were not limited to, the student's perspective. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Commission for Higher Education expresses its heartfelt appreciation for Colleen Geibert's service to the state on behalf of Indiana higher education, including its institutions and students, and wishes her every success during her internship in New York City and her future career in life after the Commission. Thank you, Colleen. Also, I would like to share this resolution honoring Alfonso. Whereas Alfonso served with distinction on the Indiana Commission for Higher Education since his initial appointment in February of 2017 and reappointment in July of 2019 to represent the 8th Congressional District. And whereas he was actively involved in the development of the Commission's 2019 through 21 biennial budget recommendation, and whereas his thoughtful contribution and participation in the development of the Commission's update of its strategic plan contributed to the visionary nature of reaching higher, delivering value, and whereas Alfonso brought informed, fresh insights into the work of the Student Success and Completion Committee since his joining that committee in 2017, and whereas Alfonso was especially focused on the needs of Latino students, sharing his own inspiring experiences when discussing the Latino community and through the development and launch of the Padres Estrellas project, and whereas his unwavering commitment to student success, particularly for students of color, was clear in all aspects of his membership on the Commission. And that now, therefore, be it resolved that the Indiana Commission for Higher Education expresses its deep appreciation to Alfonso Vidal for his 3 years of service to the state on behalf of the Indiana higher education and his continued advocacy for student success. Congratulations, Alfonso, and we will certainly miss you.
I'll move
I
adoption
present
of
these-
both by unanimous acclamation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Well, that passes by acclamation. Congratulations, Colleen and Alfonso. These positions, as well as our 4th district position, have not been appointed yet by the governor, but we hope to have an update in the coming weeks. Let me now turn to Teresa for her commissioner report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all of you who have joined us today. I first want to begin by thanking President Curtis for her kind words, but much more importantly than that, for the leadership that she's providing to Indiana State and to our state in higher education issues. It's been a real pleasure to work with her and with her sidekick, Greg Good, as well. So thanks to both of them. I know a new decade always seems like a time for beginnings and change, but I think we got a little bit more than we bargained for this year. At the commission, like everywhere else, all of you in whatever walk of life you're in, we're adjusting to these changes on multiple levels, spending a good portion of our days on Zoom calls, remote working, budget cuts, canceled events, and of course, not getting to meet face-to-face with you on our campuses around the state. And while we're making this work, it's not our venue of choice. I can guarantee you that. But in spite of these challenges, our productivity is strong and our spirit of innovation causing us to rethink our work in new ways as well. We'll spend the majority of today's meeting providing updates on COVID-19 related work. We've had a chance to talk to some of you, and we've been trying to provide some information to you, but we'll do a deeper dive today. I'll also provide an oversight later of the Rapid Recovery for a Better Future work that is underway in partnership with the Governor's Workforce Cabinet. So for my report today, I'll highlight some other activities and work. I currently serve as the chair of the National Council on State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements, known as NC-SARA. And as you know, this organization, Indiana was the first state to join NC-SARA, and its mission is to ensure quality, affordable distance education across state borders. We just completed a new strategic plan that was adopted after really a year of work and is really going to guide the work of distance education. I don't think we knew when we started that strategic plan just how critically important it was going to be to ensure quality in online education. The backbone of NC-SARA is really the states. While it's a national organization, the backbone is the states, and by extension, our 4 regional compacts. As you know, we participate in the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. 49 of the 50 states are members. As I mentioned, the only outlier is California, and its work is more important than ever. A study in February of this year, prior to all of the activities that we will be talking about today, showed a continued growing demand for post-secondary distance education opportunities. According to the report, nearly 1.3 million students were enrolled exclusively in distance programs at NC-SARA participating institutions, which was a 5% increase. The total number of students enrolled in programs, including full and hybrid models, exceeded 2.8 million students. I think these numbers would probably be higher if we were going to look at the numbers today and the trends that are taking place. I've also been having regular calls and call meetings with my colleagues at the State Higher Education Executive Officers, the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, and the National Governors Association as we work through issues related to enrollments, budgets, and issues related to remote learning and reopening plans. As you might imagine, we all see this through the lens of our own states. There are some commonalities between our states and some things that are unique to the states in which we operate. But it's also clear to me that Indiana is uniquely positioned to move forward because of the work that we've been doing, our strategic plan, and the collegial leadership that with our institutions, both public and private. I cite today one good example of this spirit of collaboration as evidenced in a recent announcement between Ivy Tech and Indiana University that effective June 1st, Ivy Tech associate level graduates are guaranteed admissions in many of the programs at IU regional campuses and IUPUI via a guaranteed admissions agreement. This means that there are guaranteed admissions agreements with 5 IU regionals, IUPUI, Ball State, Purdue, and Indiana State. This is important for multiple reasons. The commission has certainly been engaged in the work related to transfer for many years, and we know that it minimizes the cost to students and ensures the likelihood that they will complete their degree and complete it on time. Last week, I joined Secretary of Career Corrections and Talent, Blair Milo, and leaders from Indianapolis East Side, including the CEO of the Bonner Neighborhood Center, for the announcement that they would be receiving the 6th designation as a 21st century talent region. I've had the opportunity to participate in several of these, and while all of them are important, I will say that as someone who grew up on the Indianapolis East Side and who recognizes the need for revitalization of their economy, I was especially honored to join in this designation. There was clearly a lot of enthusiasm from the partners who came together, employers, community leaders, education leaders, and faith-based leaders as well. I want to conclude my report by offering my deep thanks and appreciation to both Colleen and Alfonso for their service to the commission. One of the best parts of my job is getting to serve alongside such talented, committed people as those who serve on the commission. One of the hard parts is wishing them well as they leave. We will certainly miss them both, although it is our intention to stay engaged. And I know Alfonso and Colleen have a desire to do so. For both of you, I hope that your service has deepened your commitment to higher education and the students that we serve, and we do so much better because of the contributions of members of the commission. So thank you. And I also just wanted to mention that we do have with us for the first time today, our summer intern, Lauren Lamoth. She's not getting as much of an experience as we wanted her to have. We're not even allowed to have a paid intern, so she's doing this for the experience. And I really wanted to have the opportunity to have her share a lot of my experiences with me, but she's going to have to do it remotely, and we'll try to make the experience as valuable as we can. And we're delighted to have her here with us for some of the summer months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Teresa. We're going a little out of order today, so let me turn to the committee reports. And Bev and Ken, can y'all report on the Academic Affairs Committee?
Sure. I'll just say a couple words and then turn it over to Ken. We met in June. Well, I don't know when we met. We met sometime in May. Don't have it written down. But we approved 4 programs to come forward, and they're in the board book and described. I'll just mention one of them because we often have, when we have a PhD program coming forward, we often have someone coming there to talk about it and bring it in front of the full board. But this one, we are not. But it's a very strong program from Purdue, PhD in public health, as well as a Master of Science. And it's a research degree mostly, but it's building on the area of public health where Purdue has some real strengths and linking with some of their collaborative areas, pharmacy, veterinary medicine, engineering, and agriculture. And we know that we need all of those areas, and certainly a big focus on public health. So this is a strong program. The other thing I just want to mention was that we spent some time talking about how the Academic Affairs and Quality Committee can be supportive of and promote the importance of the continued building of new academic programs and that approval process. As Trent, one of our committee members, said, it's about innovation, and we need innovation, and we don't want to stop it. We want to continue to support the ongoing review of programs as they come forward and come out of revisions with obviously meeting new needs. And Ken, I'll ask to see if you have something else you might like to add about that.
Actually, no. You've done a terrific job as usual, so I have nothing to add.
Nor do I. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Now let me turn to Chris Lamoth and Alexa on budget and productivity.
I will pass the mic to Alexa.
Thank you. So the Budget and Productivity Committee met on May 28th, and they heard 3 projects. The first project is the Vincennes University Advanced Manufacturing Renovation Project. This project will enhance and expand training labs located in the Vincennes University Technology Center and the Indiana Center for Applied Technology. This project is $4 million and entirely funded by the appropriation from HEA 1001. Due to this is an expedited action or item. The second project we heard was for Purdue University, and it was the purchase of 225 acres of land at North 375 West in West Lafayette from the McInnes Farm Corporation. The total cost of this project is $3 million, and it's primarily funded with gift funds. And due to this is also an expedited item. And then the third project we heard was the Purdue Memorial Union ground floor renovation. The estimated total for this project is $47.3 million. And this is actually going to be a discussion item later this afternoon.
Terrific. Thank you. And Mike and Liz, y'all want to talk about student success and completion?
Mr. Chairman, could I make a comment before they begin? This is Teresa.
Yes, Teresa.
We should have mentioned this up front. Our office is abuzz today, and the reason why Steph is not with us is she delivered twins yesterday, and
oh my God,
a baby boy and a baby girl, and all is well. I mean, she was actually even last night sending a text to people about something on the agenda today. So we will miss her for the next couple of months as she acclimates herself to motherhood. The babies are great. They were over 5 pounds. We don't know exactly all the details yet, and we don't have all the names, but I wanted to share that with you so that you understand. She, as you would not be surprised, knowing how conscientious she is, has left everything in good shape and has passed the baton to others, and sent her work out, especially to Liz and Charlie, who are taking new leadership roles during this time. But I was remiss in not sharing this up front, but I thought this might be an appropriate time to do so.
That is such exciting news. Congrats to Stephanie. Wow. Can't wait to see pictures of those twins. And she did, I was working with her last week. She never slowed down, I can tell you that. So that's great news, Teresa. And please pass on to her congratulations from all of us. Mike, Allie, do you want to give us a report on student success and completion?
Mike, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I am. Yes, we met on April 23rd, which was about a month into the COVID-19, and but realized that our staff was continuing to work hard in terms of doing the things that need to be done, focusing on getting the FAFSAs completion and ensuring those numbers continue to remain strong. We've got a report on that. We also talked about Invested is once again partnering with us and helping us do a lot of digital marketing to try to enhance that as well, and reaching out, doing surveys with seniors, high school seniors, trying to determine what impact this is all going to have on them. We also got a great update from Josh on the CARES Act and the public assistance that's being offered to financial institute or to educational institutions with regard to that. And there are substantial dollars that are being offered to the universities as well as being made available to students, and those are being addressed by each of the universities as well. We also had a great opportunity to hear from all of our public institutions to tell us what they were doing in light of the COVID-19. And so they provided some really exceptional feedback and really information about all the efforts that they were putting forth to ensure that they were able to finish the spring semester via online and off-campus kind of modes and things of that nature. And it's clear that they were all going through extraordinary lengths to ensure that there continued to be a quality educational delivery channel for those students as they finished and created a safe environment. So there was a lot of work being done and really great innovative efforts on all of our partners' efforts.
Terrific.
And that concludes my
Thanks.
that concludes my comments.
Thanks, Mike. Very helpful. Now let's turn to approving our minutes from last meeting. Is there a motion and second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, please say aye. The minutes are approved. So Liz sent us yesterday a number of reports that we want to go over now, and if everyone could pull that up. I don't know if you're going to are you going to show it on the screen, Liz, as you go through it? Let me turn it over to you to go through the different subjects covered by your email.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've said a few times this morning, today we have a pretty comprehensive update for all of you on the efforts of not only the commission, but our institutions to respond to COVID-19. There will be a lot of us talking. We'll be referencing a lot of documents. So that is that email you referenced, Al, contains all the information that I will show on the screen, but it might be hard to see. So that's why you have that email in your inbox. Please utilize that as we move forward. Here. Okay. I hope everyone can see my slide. Is that right?
Not yet. Is this the PowerPoint that you sent us? Fiscal implications. I've got it in front of me here, but
okay.
I don't.
Yeah, I can see it on the screen. So John, I'm not sure if why, because I can see you. It should be showing up on your screen.
It's on the screen.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I will proceed. We'll be covering a lot of topics today. It's kind of bucketed into two chunks. One is the efforts that the commission staff have undertaken over the last few months to respond to COVID-19 and the ways in which we're looking forward to address those issues. Those are kind of our two main areas. So we'll start out with Charlie and I giving an update on, there we go. All right. Just kind of the commission's response efforts as it pertains to our external efforts. I'll do a quick overview of the content on our website and some of the guidance and FAQs we've created. Again, the materials I'm about to reference are in that email, members, and of course, if you are watching from home or don't have that, you can navigate to our website now and see all of these resources. But I just wanted to highlight the ways in which we've pulled together some resources for the general public to have in response to this. The first being a document that we emailed probably just over a month ago, just an overview of all of the shared and unique institutional efforts that our institutions are doing to respond and react to the pandemic. It also has a section on the modifications we've made to state financial aid. This item is also embedded on page 5 of your agenda book, so please feel free to look at that there. And here again is this item that we've made. It's pretty comprehensive, highlights the ways in which our institutions are supporting students, impacting their local and state communities overall, and just some of the larger contributions that as an institution and individuals that they've made. We wanted to pull that together in a document and highlight their good work. This next item is, this actually mirrors what other SHIELD states have done to provide guidance to their institutions, both public and private. But this was released at the end of March, just as an immediate form of our office providing some guidance to our institutions, but it has action steps, best practices, resources for campuses. I just wanted to compile that information. And again, this mirrors what other SHIELD agencies have done in other states. This next item, I won't spend too much time on it, as Ken will be talking about this in greater detail, but we did work with our institutions to develop transfer guidance and look at grading scales, pass-fail information for each campus. So that information is available as well. We continue to update our FAQs as we move forward in the pandemic. As new information comes in, as new resources become available, we are updating that regularly. I will say that this file is more geared toward campus practitioners. We do have resources and FAQs really dedicated to students and families on our Learn More Indiana website. So, and again, the language is a little different. It's shaped more for students and families. So that's where that type of information has to be. This last document is an overview of the CARES Act. I know Josh Garrison has provided an update on this in the past, but again, this still lives on our website as a overview of the educational provisions in the Act. I can't be on this page without highlighting that we have a recorded message from Commissioner Lubbers available as well. I know that a team of our comms team went to her house and recorded this in her backyard, and there's a nice sighting of her brick house there. So that was a neat experience for them to do that, kind of out of our normal routine, but we wanted to make sure that we had a student-centered message available as well, and helping students make good decisions about financial aid and keeping them, keeping their eligibility. So that's some of the messaging embedded in there. I will go ahead and pass it off to Charlie to talk about our media efforts.
Thanks, Liz. It's nice to hear and see from all of you today. I will mention that when Doug Littner and I went to the commissioner's house to help with the video, it was all properly socially distanced, and I got to hold a boom mic, which was very fun. So I think that turned out well, and I know that we had sent that around to all of you, and I hope you got a chance to see that. So a couple of the things I'm going to talk about. First, I want to highlight social media has been a really active part of our strategy, particularly because it's an online virtual medium, and in staying in touch with students and families and institutions during this time. In a few slides, I'm going to talk about the host of virtual events that we've had, particularly around the FAFSA and FAFSA filing completion part, and those have garnered some really solid results, which I'm excited to share as well. The video message, again, that was another great opportunity to have on social media. And we've been able to share a number of news about grants and scholarships, such as the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship recipients at that time. One other thing I want to touch on is the 2020 college readiness reports. Jake Burns and I will be presenting an overview of that later today to all of you. But I wanted to highlight that was something that an output that we worked on during this time, highlighting the state's college going rate. And so I'll look forward to sharing a little bit about that with you all later today. Going on, what you can see on the COVID resources page that we've created is the document. Actually, Liz, if you go back a slide, sorry. And it's right there. If you want to take a look at that, we've got the various op-ed coverage that the commissioner's op-ed ran in the Indy Star, as well as the several other statewide publications about how the state and also institutions are responding to the COVID-19 crisis. So that, if you haven't had a chance to read that yet, it's right there for you. Additionally, a lot of topics that reporters reached out to the commissioner about were about financial and enrollment impacts of the pandemic on colleges. So she had several opportunities to talk about that, and as well as the response from our public and private institutions. Another one that I'm really excited about, and I hope you all have had a chance to listen, is the commissioner's podcast appearance with Dr. Sue Elsterman from Ivy Tech on the Our College Your Voices podcast. They had a great in-depth conversation. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that, please do. We've also been putting out several press releases, as I mentioned earlier, just a variety of ongoing work. And then again, one of the biggest impacts that we had during this time, because of the time of this pandemic was the ensuring people are filing the FAFSA. So because our FAFSA deadline, while it did change a little bit, it was still, we only extended it a little bit and people still needed to get that filed. So definitely want to give a shout out to our outreach and communications team that put together some really great events, virtual events to reach out to students and families during this time. Okay, go on this. And then you can see all of this right here, if essentially just the review of what I've gone over there. Okay. And then also we'll briefly just touch on the virtual events. As I mentioned, we had 2 FAFSA Frenzy events, which were planned to be in person, but then ended up being where we needed to have it in a virtual space. The videos are still on our Facebook page, on the Learn More Indiana Facebook page, if you'd like to go and take a look. But I can say that both of those videos had over 1,000 views, and we were able to reach out to a lot of students and families during that time. And so that was, again, where Invested really helped the partnership because they were available to answer questions. And, you know, after these events, while we are not saying that these events specifically led to a certain number of filings, we do know in looking at the numbers that FAFSA filings did increase by 4% after these events. So I do want to think that there was definitely an impact that we made there. On May 20th, we had a Scholar Success program on Instagram Live, which was definitely a new way to use Instagram. We hadn't done that before. We did get 20 new student followers, which is a big deal because students are definitely on that platform, and that's one of the harder platforms for us to get into students and into their space. So it was really exciting to see that sort of response to that. Coming up at the end of June, as you know, the Scholars deadline is coming up at the end of the month. So taking all this information and good experience that we've gotten through these virtual events, we're going to be having a live Scholars enrollment, 2 events, June 25th and then the day before the Scholars deadline. So we'll have more interesting information to share after those take place. And then again, this is a broad look at the coverage because institutions, partners helped us share this information that we were getting these events out there. We've also had a couple of national interest in pointing to these events that we've done. So they were hugely popular, and we've also been asked to highlight how we put these events together for the National College Access Network's FAFSA Bright Spots blog this summer. So we'll let you know when that publishes. Oh, Liz, you're muted.
There, it was going to happen to me at some point, you guys. I'm the worst about this, but I'll finish this page by just talking real quickly about we've touched in many ways on how the commission is really trying to be intentional about compiling and promoting the efforts of our institutions. Ken will probably talk about the survey that the academic affairs team conducted. That was one of the first ways we did that. We also had a representative from each of our institutions participate in the Student Success and Completion Committee meeting. As Mike mentioned, we've been promoting items on social media. We also made the work of our institutions the basis of our newsletter last time. So if you are not on, if you're not on that, please email me and I'm happy to add you to that. That goes out bi-monthly. So, but the entire main focus of that was the great work our institutions are doing and just keeping everyone up to date on that. So we were happy to be able to promote them in that way as well, and we'll continue to do so. I want to also touch on the Learning Support Grant. This is something that our office has done in partnership with the Indiana Gear Up program. Essentially, we solicited applications from our college and university partners to encourage them to apply for grants of up to $100,000 to connect and fund programs that support the high school graduating class of 2020. We've, talked a lot about making sure that population in particular has the tools and resources that they need to transition into college successfully. So we wanted to do something at the commission for that. So That application closed on June 5th, and we'll be announcing the recipients of that very soon. I believe my colleague Jared or Shannon, they may be online as well. If they have any thoughts to add, they're welcome to pipe in and do that. But it was something we wanted to make sure you were updated on as well.
Liz, I'll just add, oops, sorry, background. This is Jared Wilson from the commission, but I will just add that we have announced to all of the recipients, at least preliminarily, if they have been funded, and they are all responding to us if they're going to accept the modifications to the grants that we've provided them. So as soon as they do that, we will have a list of individuals to announce. Hopefully by tomorrow, if not Monday of next week is the goal.
Great, thank you. We'll continue on with our conversation about the commission's response efforts, but I will pass the speaking role over to Dr. Sauer, and he'll give kind of an overview on the academic side of things, what we've been doing.
Okay, thanks, Liz. And the heading here was institutional survey and academic guidance. I'm really going to spend most of the time on the academic guidance. The survey of how institutions were responding to COVID-19 was referenced earlier. There was a nice high-level slide that was covered earlier that indicated how institutions were supporting students, how they were having an impact on the local community as well as statewide, and how individuals were responding to the crisis. For example, a number of distinguished researchers were contributing to efforts to make the COVID-19 more researched and looking for cures and so on. That survey was conducted in April. Following the Student Success and Completion Committee, which Commissioner Ali had described earlier, we sent you, all commission members, a 30-page document which summarized in great detail all of the things that the institutions were doing. So let me turn to the guidance on transfer for college students. We, above all, wanted to preserve the transfer practices that we had in place, the core transfer library, statewide gen ed core, and the transfer single articulation pathways. Given the massive shift from classroom instruction to online instruction, we wanted to make sure that all of those agreements were not jeopardized, that the practices and policies would apply. The tricky part came to grades. That's where we had to spend some time trying to figure out what to do here. All of our public institutions, and certainly many independent institutions, shifted to an optional pass-fail grade system. So students still could elect to get a letter grade as they would under normal circumstances, but all students were also given the option of choosing a pass-fail grade or credit, non-credit, satisfactory, non-satisfactory grade if they chose. It was really up to them. And in some instances, the institutions advised students, given their particular circumstances, to opt for the letter grade. In other cases, there was some guidance given to students to take the pass-fail option. The tricky part came in transferring credit for courses that had a pass grade. The problem is that in some cases, pass had a different meaning with respect to how what letter grades it covered. So some institutions had A, B, and C grades covered under the pass grade. In other instances, they included the D grade in that. So in light of that, and there was not a consistent response here, but some institutions felt it would be better to accept the pass grade, even from an institution in which the pass grade might include a small number of students who got Ds. Other institutions chose not to go that route, so it was a mixed response. But even for those institutions that shifted to the ABCD acceptance of a pass grade, the impact really wasn't as big as as you might imagine. Ivy Tech, for example, which of course is the largest transfer institution in the state, in practice actually gives very few D grades. So students will either get a C or they'll get an F. But in any case, some of the universities opted to accept the pass grade, even if an institution included Ds in that pass grade. There was agreement that a notation would be put on the transcript to signify that the grade the course was transferring under the particular circumstances that we find ourselves in now, under the circumstances that we're covering the spring 2020 semester. It was clear that more placement testing will be needed in order to ensure that the shift from classroom instruction to online instruction really did permit students to master all of the student learning outcomes they were supposed to master in that particular course. And all institutions will be providing additional academic support services, including co-requisite instruction or help desks. Okay, Liz, you want to turn to the next slide, please? So, guidance on, guidance on, yes.
Hey, Ken, Al Hubbard here. I wanted to
yes.
ask a question. When the students had the choice of going pass-fail or grades, I'm just curious, what percent chose pass-fail versus grades? Or do you know?
I can't answer the question, and that would probably take a bit of analysis, but it's certainly an interesting question, and we'll try to get back to you on that.
Hey, Al,
Yeah.
This is John. I think the bad students chose pass-fail, and the good students said, "Give me a grade."
I think that's right too, John.
Hey, I wanted to ask, did all of our state institutions do this? Was that mandatory or was that voluntary?
No, well, in providing students the option of taking a pass-fail or credit, non-credit, etc., that was totally voluntary. But all of our public institutions concluded that it would be appropriate to provide students with those options. And this was actually an option that was widely applied not only in Indiana, but across the country.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Al, I'd say at least anecdotally, in terms of the students that I had in class, I had about a quarter take pass-fail. And surprisingly, that some of them were very good students. I had more than a couple of students that were going into the final with an A, chose pass-fail because they realized that they could pass the class and not have to write a 30-page paper. And so, you know, it was really a little bit of everyone that chose that option.
Oh,
that's interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to the guidance on transfer for high school students. I would note that the College Board shifted to a 45-minute outline online advanced placement exam in a place of the usual 3-hour exam or so that would normally be taken for a student who took an advanced placement course. This 45-minute version actually was available previously. The College Board indicated that this has been an option that was available for some time, and it was typically applied in cases of some type of disaster. Probably the The best example would be Katrina and the havoc that wreaked on a number of students in high school at the time. The College Board claims, as a result of analyses it did, that the results of the 45-minute exam were as good an indicator of mastery of learning outcomes as the 3-hour exam. And I know that kind of begs the question, well, if they're that good, why not just shift to a 45-minute exam? But we won't get into that. I will also report that there were a number of technical difficulties that some students experienced. Again, I'm not sure how many students were disadvantaged by technical issues, but in any case, many students did take that 45-minute exam, and the public institutions all agreed that they would stick to the course equivalencies that were associated with a particular AP exam. So if someone got a 5 on AP calculus, and an institution normally would translate that into credit for Calculus 1 and Calculus 2, the institution would follow that course equivalency, even though that equivalency would be based on a 45-minute exam. All of the scores, by the way, for AP exams and how they translate into courses is on the Transfer-In website, and we recently updated those equivalencies. With respect to CTE students, or rather non-CTE dual credit students, and by CTE I mean career and technical education, we encourage, working with the Department of Education, we encourage all students to finish the material online so that they could get credit for that particular dual credit course. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's turn to the career and technical education dual credit courses. Some of those could be completed online. So, for example, a business course it could have the later material that would normally have been covered in classroom toward the end of that class covered through online materials. But it was a different situation with respect to CTE courses that required hands-on equipment, welding, for example, and clinicals. The governor's workforce cabinet staff surveyed dual credit students and instructors and indicated that there were some 300 to 400 students that were interested in a summer institute so that they could get that experience utilizing the equipment or having required clinical instruction. By far, the most number of students who were interested in the Summer Institute were those who were trying to earn a CNA, Certified Nurse Aide certification, actually constituted about half of the students. There was great collaboration between Ivy Tech, VU, the career centers, and high schools. Because those 300 to 400 students were located in many different places, and it seemed to be much more efficient if students took classes, well, ideally at the career center, but if they couldn't take the classes there, then Ivy Tech and VU agreed to open their campuses to permit that instruction to take place. In addition, there was a task force formed to look forward to the fall, and should the fall semester involve much more online instruction or alternative instruction, additional guidance would be issued in advance of the fall semester. Next slide, please. With respect to the... yes.
Ken, what about California universities have decided just to do away with the college boards and the ACT and SATs. Any discussion about that among your peers?
We have not had any sort of collective conversation about that. That may well vary by campus, and in fact, I might invite Trent to offer his experience. Has that topic come up, Trent?
Yeah, it's come up quite a bit. I know that there is a committee at USI that's investigating it, but certainly as I talk to peers across the state, this is a pretty significant trend. I can tell you, especially, I mean, graduate programs have shifted heavily in that direction to do away with standardized tests, and we're seeing more and more pressure to do that at the undergraduate level. I know that there have been some studies that have been done at universities across the country that have already made that decision, and they're finding fairly similar student success rates, regardless of whether or not they require students who are entering have taken the test or not.
So they look at their record, and that's it?
Yeah, they weigh other factors, most significantly high school GPA, and they use that as part of a portfolio to predict success.
Interesting. With grade inflation, I think it would be more difficult. Grade inflation in different school systems could have some impact, but I guess from what you're saying, the results seem to bear out that it's working in certainly some cases.
And they do consider that. You know, the high school will submit a school profile when they submit the student's transcript that gives a sense of how academically challenging, what's the grade distribution, what are the classes and grading scale like for that institution. And so that becomes part of the calculation. I mean, I can tell you personally, I'm an advocate of it. You know, from the students that I see, their level of effort that they exert in high school, which is probably their best predictor of GPA, seems to be the same thing that predicts their college success. And if anything, I think it's more of an obstacle for students who are first generation students than it is a really valuable tool in terms of screening.
Yeah, and it also, some are not good testers. I mean, some get all shook up and emotional and they don't do well even though they're good students.
And Commissioner Pop, if you're interested, we can do a survey of the institutions and let you know what we find out.
Yeah, that might be interesting.
Okay, that's what we'll do. With respect to the Board for Proprietary Education, the 20 institutions authorized that have authorization through BPE did provide some guidance to students, and all of those links were put on the Commission's website. Almost all of them, like other institutions, shifted to online instruction. The American College of Education actually is a totally online institution, so there was nothing that different needed to take place with the programs they offered. In some cases, a few prepared materials that students could use at home to complete the coursework. Interestingly, there were very few of the institutions indicated that if they had specialized accreditation for a particular program, that there was no specific response that needed to be made to that accrediting body with respect to things that they were doing differently when they shifted to online instruction. Next slide, please. The next slide, which I hope you will see very shortly. There we are. Deals with distance education. So let me quickly state our distance ed policy. We keep track of programs that are delivered by distance education. Our definition of a program delivered by distance education is that 80% or more of the material that the students would need to be need to complete in order to earn that credential is delivered online. In the future, we're going to distinguish between programs that are 100% online versus those that are blended, which is to say the 88 to 99% online, the remainder face-to-face. But in any case, the institutions were concerned that if their response to the pandemic went into the fall and even into the spring semester of the coming academic year, and even as far as summer 2021, that they would cross that threshold of 80% of the program being delivered online. So the institutions requested that we think about how we might handle that situation. We actually came up with a pretty simple way of approaching this, and this was discussed by the AA&Q committee, but it really involved a blanket temporary authorization for all certificates and degree programs to be delivered online. That was effective immediately when the policy was put in place, and will go through summer 2021 unless conditions would suggest that that temporary waiver be removed at an earlier date. But in any case, it seemed to solve the problem. We, as I indicated, we do track those programs that are delivered online. In fact, they are actually approved. If a program wants to shift to online instruction, that would normally take a routine staff action request that would be reported to the AA&Q committee. And once the committee has reviewed the routine staff actions, including those for distance ed, they become approved. Next slide, please. We also had conversations with David Wantz at the Independent Colleges of Indiana. The topic typically was broached because of the natural question, are any of your institutions, because of the crisis, in danger of closing? And the response was no, but that sort of led to a conclusion that it would be a good idea to collaborate on surveying the ICI institutions with respect to the state of their archiving of transcripts. Obviously, transcripts are a real problem if an institution does close. So we agreed that a survey would be conducted that would get at information such as how many years are covered by the institution's present digital archive, what are the cost benefits associated with digitizing paper records, and if an institution does close, what happens to the transcripts, how would students be able to get copies of those transcripts, and all of this would be done with an eye toward indicating best practices in this area. I will say that the Board for Proprietary Ed is in the process of concluding a transcript audit of all 20 for-profit and other institutions covered by the Board for Proprietary Ed. This is a meeting next week, and given the fact that this virtual meeting is hosted by Indiana State, I wish to acknowledge that April Hay, the registrar at Indiana State, actually was the consultant that the commission BPE used in order to conduct this transfer audit, and will be providing, well, the results of that audit will be discussed next week, and that should provide some guide with respect to how best practices for digitizing transcripts. Last slide, please.
Hey,
yeah.
Do I understand what you're saying is that because of the the virus and the tremendous impact that it has, that there are going to be some of these 25 or 30 private colleges go out of business? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, the original conversation took place discussing whether or not that was a reality in any instances. The indication we got was no, that none of our nonprofit ICI institutions are in any immediate danger.
Oh, okay.
Certainly as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Yeah, okay. Sorry if led to the wrong impression there. That was the context for the conversation taking place, but we decided that the more we discussed transcripts, that it would be a good idea to continue the conversation.
Yeah, if that ever happened, yeah, I see.
Right, exactly. And it's certainly much more likely to happen with for-profit institutions, and that's why we've gone to some length to ensure that student records at for-profit institutions are in good shape.
Okay.
Finally, Commission has heard on previous occasions of the engagement that we have with Credential Engine, and that Credential Engine, in partnership with the Commission and Lumina Foundation, received a National Science Foundation grant for a Phase 1 project. And yesterday we made the presentation to the NSF review panel for a Phase 2 grant, so we'll see if that comes through. But as a result of that partnership, NSF recently awarded a grant to Credential Engine specifically to focus on healthcare programs, and in particular, it has a focus on the state of New York and how we can improve the linking of students who have appropriate preparation for jobs. So we will take advantage of that grant that has been given to Credential Engine and the work that is about to start in New York to try to improve our own information availability on health-related programs here in Indiana. And that concludes my presentation.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick comment as we conclude this presentation. As I read through all of this, I have to admit, as a commission member, I'm a little bit troubled. I recognize that this is an unprecedented time that we're in, and that certainly accommodations need to be made. But I'm concerned when I see that, the standard for transfer of credit can be as low as a D-, which would indicate to me that that is not mastery of subject knowledge, and it's just moving people along. And I think the thing that's concerning is that sometimes we forget that we are, as a commission, also representing those that are taking the students into employment. And there's no question that continues to be a gap with employers on concerns of the quality of kids coming out of our institutions and their ability to successfully move into the world of work, whether that's private sector or public sector or not-for-profit sector or whatever. And I do think that we have to be mindful of that and have discussions around that, and maybe continue to even track that by survey, maybe in partnership with the Indiana Chamber of Commerce or others. But I'm concerned about that gap, and I know that we're in really unprecedented times. There's a lot of change that's going to occur as a result of what's happened, and there's going to be a new normal, and we're not all sure what that new normal is. But I do think, or I continue to believe, that our public-private higher education system is one of Indiana's greatest assets, and we cannot afford for that to diminish over time. And I think there's some tough questions here that deserve the attention and focus of this commission in the months ahead. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
Right. Chris, if I may, I do want to emphasize a couple points about that including the Ds in the pass and accepting the credit. There were actually 2 institutions that chose to go that route. And clearly this is very much on a temporary basis. And that was the reason for wishing to note on the transcripts that the particular policy here only applied to students who transferred their spring semester credits into the receiving institution. So it may not be quite as, that particular policy is more limited than it may sound.
The other thing I wanted to, excuse me, go ahead.
No. Well, I was just going to ask which 2 institutions do accept the D grade as a pass.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Maybe I misunderstood you, Ken. I thought you said that only 2 institutions treat Ds as a pass.
Well, and that's only for this semester. Normally, under normal circumstances, if you're transferring a single course from one institution to another, the requirement is a C. That is the normal required grade, a C or better, and that course would be accepted for transfer. In this, right.
Sorry, go ahead.
So it's only this semester.
You wanted to know which one.
That would change, and it would be only for those students that were coming from an institution that had a pass grade that included a D. If the student elected to have a letter grade and they got a D, that would not be accepted by the receiving institution.
And what Al was asking though is he was asking for which 2 institutions made that decision.
I'm sorry, Tracy?
Which schools?
Oh, which schools? Indiana University and Indiana State University.
Okay. I wanted to ask. Go ahead.
Well, I'll be very quick, John. Sorry, but just I appreciate Chris stopping us and raising this because I think it's absolutely appropriate. So thank you, Chris, for doing that. John, please.
Yeah. I was sort of along the same line, wondering when you talked about these distant courses, they have to be reviewed by the AAQ. I guess that's the Academic Affairs. And is that one of our committees within the commission? I should know that, but I just wondered, how do you, what the credentials of that committee would be quite important. Is that your committee, Ken?
Well, yes, it's chaired by Bev. Yes, that's right. Dr. Bev.
So it's our internal committee. Okay, good. Thanks.
But what I hear from members is that one, the continued vigilance that this is a one-time decision and that we follow potential learning loss or, how students do when they continue with the next courses. So I do think on multiple levels, we're looking at these issues related to learning loss for high school students, as well as those who are actually moving on, to make sure that when they arrive on a college campus, we identify gaps in learning if they exist. So I think, those on the call, I've heard this, and I think it's an important commitment that we need to make sure that students are ready as they move forward.
And I'd also add and stress that more placement testing will be done, which would reveal any weaknesses. So under normal circumstances, a course might transfer without placement testing, but I think much more placement testing will be done with students entering in the fall semester. In some cases, that could result in a student either getting additional academic support, or maybe even a conclusion that says, well, we'll accept your credit, but in effect, you have to take this course over if you're going to continue with your the next course in the sequence. So the institutions are definitely concerned about quality as well, and I think they're taking steps to try to ensure that a student has the foundation that they ought to have to continue on.
Thanks very much, Ken. Liz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on to Colby. He's going to give us an update on financial aid.
All right, good afternoon, commission members. I want to highlight the efforts the commission has taken to help our financial aid recipients, whether the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing disruption that's caused during the spring semester. So I want to start with the FAFSA filing deadline. As Charlie mentioned earlier, this certainly has received the most attention. Unfortunately, the Commission's FAFSA filing deadline for the Franco-Bannon Grant and the 21st Century Scholarship fell really right at the height of the pandemic. Our original deadline was set as April 15th. And when we got to April 15th, we took a look at the actual number of applications that we received from Indiana students. And when we looked at the data, we noticed that we were just slightly down when it came to overall, looking at all students across the state, about 1%, 241,000 applicants. But when we started to dig into the data, we noticed that the impact was more significant when it came to looking at lower income students that would qualify for our Franco-Bannon Grant. We were about 7% down. So we made the decision to extend the FAFSA filing deadline. This is something that other states have also decided to do that had deadlines very closely situated to the state of Indiana's as well. Instead of picking a specific date in the future, we wanted to monitor FAFSA submissions, especially since at the last commission meeting, we set the award amounts for the Franco-Bannon Grant. Setting a deadline in the future, it would risk over-awarding students, which would cause a fiscal issue for the programs. So instead, we monitored FAFSA submissions carefully. Eventually, we did draw the deadline at April 27th. We extended the deadline through April 27th. That allowed us to now consider over 6,000 additional students. And as of today, 4,300 of those students are within the Franco-Bannon Grant eligible range when we look at their financial need. And we expect that number to increase as students go back to school in the fall. They go through a process called professional judgment where financial aid administrators may adjust some of the variables that impact their financial need, like income, which would qualify them for a larger Franco-Bannon Grant. One thing to note as well is the FAFSA filing deadline. This only applies to the Franco-Bannon Grant as well as our 21st Century Scholarship. The Workforce Ready Grant, as well as our Adult Student Grant, they do not have a FAFSA filing deadline. For our Adult Student Grant, we award students the Adult Student Grant on a rolling basis. So we award them throughout the year. But this April 15th and now April 27th deadline, that applies to our 21st Century Scholarship and our Franco-Bannon. The next step that we took, we partially waived the credit completion requirement for students utilizing the 21st Century Scholarship, the Franco-Bannon Grant, and the Next Generation Hoosier Educators Scholarship during spring 2020. As you likely remember, those three specific awards have a requirement that students earn 30 credit hours per year to be able to renew their scholarships for the next year. Because of all of the disruption that occurred during spring 2020 specifically, any student using one of those awards during spring 2020, we're waiving up to 15 credit hours for those students of the requirement. So it's not a complete waiving of the credit completion requirement, but we are trying to mitigate the impact of the disruption that was caused to our financial aid recipients during spring 2020. Specifically for our 21st Century Scholars in high school, in the graduating class of 2020, those students have to complete what's called our Scholar Success Program. These are 12 grade-specific activities that prepare students for college and beyond. We emphasize through our communications that 11 of those 12 Scholar Success Program activities have virtual options and highlighted those for our students. One of the requirements is completing either the SAT or ACT, and in light of the College Board canceling several testing dates for the SAT, we have taken the action of waiving that specific requirement that our 21st Century Scholars complete the SAT or ACT. This is a one-time waiver specifically for the graduating class of 2020. Additionally, one of the requirements for the Scholar Success Program is that students file the FAFSA. And what we've done is for our 21st Century Scholars to help them file the FAFSA, we mailed paper FAFSAs to each of our senior 21st Century Scholars that had not yet filed the FAFSA. Just another avenue for our scholars that maybe didn't have internet access or access to a device to file the FAFSA online. We provided them with a paper option. Also related to scholars, to be able to convert your 21st Century Scholarship enrollment into the 21st Century Scholarship in college, you have to earn at least a 2.5 GPA in high school to receive the scholarship. We haven't waived that requirement, but we have provided flexibility for our high schools to either report the final high school GPA, or if the student had earned at least a 2.5 GPA at the end of fall semester, they could also report that if that was the higher GPA. So it's important to note 21st Century Scholars still had to earn the 2.5 GPA or greater, but the high schools could report the GPA as of the end of fall 2019 to mitigate, again, some of the disruption from spring semester. Finally, I want to mention there's a number of sources of emergency aid, specifically to help students with the disruption in college of COVID-19. Some of it is institutional aid. Some of it is now permitted or awarded because of the Federal CARES Act that passed. We wanted to make certain that receiving this additional emergency aid, it's meant to be supplemental, that it didn't impact or lower the amount of state financial aid students qualified for. So we issued some guidance to clarify that the emergency aid provided under the CARES Act or by your institution won't have an impact on the amount of state financial aid the student is eligible for during spring 2020, summer 2020, and fall 2020 academic terms. And that concludes my part of the presentation. I'll turn it back over to Liz.
Thank you, Colby. Probably need you to give up controls, maybe.
Thank you.
All right, I think I got it back from you. There we go. Okay, the last item we want to touch on in terms of the commission's response efforts is our 2020 high school senior survey, and I'll ask Charlie to cover that.
Very happy to do that. Thanks, Liz. So the goal with this survey was to stay connected to high school students, high school seniors specifically, and gain an understanding of what the graduates are planning to do for their future. So in partnership with the Department of Education, we created a brief survey to gain information for high school seniors in the 2020 class to find out what their post-graduation plans were, whether they were going to college, in-state or out of state, going straight to work, entering the military, continuing an apprenticeship, or if they just weren't sure. Or had some other specific situation going on. We asked of their areas of interest, health and life sciences, IT and business, for et cetera, the transportation, advanced manufacturing, and others, to align with some of the high demand industry sectors that we know are out there. Additionally, we asked for their email contact and for what high school they went to. We have utilized our combined communications channels, not having a ton of direct contact information, but with impressive results considering that this survey was optional. Go ahead, Liz. So we had almost 15,000 unique individuals complete a survey about their next steps after high school. And you can see the majority are planning to attend an in-state college, with about 11% planning to attend college out of state. Additionally, as is explained here and broken down on the screen, just quick highlights are about the same amount of respondents who are planning to move into the world of work, are also about the same amount that are unsure of their next step. Additionally, there's a small percentage of these 15,000 that we're looking at apprenticeship programs, either ongoing or new, as well as looking to turn to the military, or are there some other sort of plan that was not stated in our survey. Go on, Liz. And what is perhaps not sure.
Excuse me, can I ask a question on that page?
Yeah.
Is this, I realize it's not a scientific survey since people decided, I mean, not everyone responded, or you didn't have a cross section for certain.
Right.
These numbers seem higher than what is actually what's been taking place in the past. Is that accurate? This is a very high.
Yeah, I would say absolutely, Al. This is Teresa. It's not indicative of our college going rates. So I think you did have perhaps more motivated people to answer this. People who might have been more unsure might not have been as likely. I don't think this, I mean, I think this is instructive to us, but it's not instructive in terms of a total accurate read. It's more about what we do with these numbers now that we have these individuals. So how do we target people who we do know, they say they don't know, or, you know, and we provide some information to them. How do we encourage those who say they are planning to go to college to make sure that they're encouraged to do so? So I think it's more, it is not scientific, that it was people probably who were more motivated for some reason, but it does give us information about how to make contact with them this summer.
Well, well, I'm delighted to hear. I'm delighted to hear that y'all are going to be reaching out to them to help them think through their next step.
Yeah, and actually I'll go over that in just a second with our plans so that you can see really what we're, how we're going to approach these reach outs and contacts. Real quickly though, and Liz, if you go to the next slide, I just want to touch briefly on the sector interests, and maybe not surprisingly in the middle of a healthcare crisis, that the sector interest for those in this non-scientific survey that are interested in going to college or not going to college, the majority was health and life sciences. And then I think it's just, again, more informative for our needs going forward. And then if you go to the next slide. Again, about not quite 2,000 of these students are going into work or unsure of their next step. So these could really benefit from our training offerings and support in the state of Indiana. Of the 3% who said other, many did mention some sort of training program, whether that was cosmetology school, attending college out of country, for example. Again, we are also doing more analysis and follow-up for those who said they were unsure. I will also outline a few comments that I think can shine a light on the variety of responses, but that do sort of show a broad level of concern about the pandemic, but also some who are continuing on just as they might have previously. There are a couple here on the screen. I'll read those, and I've got a couple more. This one respondent said, accepted to several colleges, but if my family needs me to stay, I will not go to college to help financially because COVID-19 has hurt the income of my single parent household. Another one, due to COVID-19, I plan on taking a gap year to save up some money, and then I plan on attending a college out of state. We had several other that were sort of along the, depending on what happens with COVID. And then just one for fun that was performing magic and making films. So again, while there are some who are concerned, some are still just planning to go as they were previously. Next steps, Liz, if you go to, thanks. So our goal is before July 1st. Our outreach and communications team is actively working on this messaging right now. We are going to send follow-up targeted messages to the following two groups of respondents. We are going to be reaching out to those who are college going, both in-state and out of state, sharing resources for their transition from high school to college. Additionally, we are going to focus on those who are going either into the workforce, to an apprenticeship, or those who are unsure. So that's an opportunity for us to reach out to them with industry sector information. Again, we're going to be pulling from external partners to help source and support this information, as well as providing information on state financial aid, career explorations, resources, and more. And I think that is, yeah.
I have one other question.
Sure.
I'm delighted that y'all are going to be reaching out to them. I'm surprised we have that the bandwidth to get that done. Is that all done electronically? I mean, how do we do this?
Sure. So our outreach team is working diligently and has been really for the past several weeks to come up with a good way to access all of these important groups of people. I think we're going to be using a combination of email and also the linking certain information on websites, so that when we are reaching out to these people, and maybe Shannon Elward, I know, and Jared Wilson are also on the line, and they are the two that have been really tackling this work. So maybe one of them has a better response than myself, if one of them wants to share.
You know, this is Teresa. I would just say this. I think this is an example of where some things we aren't able to do right now with our outreach team. We're not able to go to schools. We're not able to do some of the kind of work that we've done in the past. So what I've really been challenging our staff to do is to think of things that we can do now, because we aren't able to do some of the other things that we did. And I think this would be an example of this, where we now have more time, more capacity to have more direct outreach with some students, and we don't have the ability to actually do some of the things we used to do. So I'm really proud of the team for stepping up and filling in the gaps in new ways because of the limitations we have in old roles.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you. And this is the point in which we'll kind of pivot our conversation still about COVID-19, but looking forward and how, we're looking at fall reopening, some of the fiscal implications of the pandemic, and we'll close with talking about our rapid recovery efforts. So I'll ask Josh to start us off with talking about fall reopening.
Thank you, Liz, and good afternoon, commission members and staff. It is my privilege to talk about the various reopening plans that we are seeing across the state. I know that each institution could likely give an hour-long presentation themselves on what they are doing to make sure their campus is ready to open in the fall and it's safe for students, faculty, and staff. All campuses, just like all businesses, cities, and organizations, are working at developing these comprehensive reopening plans. And as the summer progresses, and even as we get into the fall, these plans will continue to develop. They will be fluid as the facts on the ground change. And as I said, the one thing that's been very clear from the beginning in reviewing and looking at these plans is that safety has been the #1 priority. I'm not going to go school by school. I'm going to cover topic area by topic area in hopes not to be redundant on the information that I will provide. Each institution is at a different phase in their planning for reopening. Some of them have very fully detailed plans out there already, and some are finalizing their plans even this week, as I was getting text messages and phone calls and emails even right up to the point that this meeting started. To begin, all right. The vast majority of our institutions will resume in-person instruction in August and continue until Thanksgiving break. They will, from Thanksgiving on, move to a remote instruction model where they will have their finals week and their study week remotely, not bringing students back to class after that point. Vincennes has not fully announced what they're going to do yet in terms of this. They're still working on this. Ivy Tech, and I'll cover why a little bit later, is going to have traditional classes available after the Thanksgiving break as well. Some of our institutions have also announced to be able to get in the required numbers of weeks for classes. To make sure that education is done in an earlier phase, that they're going to be no longer having their fall breaks, and that they're going to have classes on Labor Day. This will allow them to get in the instruction that's needed, the education that's needed before the Thanksgiving break happens. One of the biggest topics that you see across these plans, and if you had the opportunity last week to watch President Daniels talk before the Senate Health Committee in DC, you saw the stress of protecting students and staff. Institutions are working to maintain the supplies of the critical equipment needed to reduce transmission of COVID-19. Purdue has announced that they're going to be having 90 days. They're going to work to maintain 90 days of critical equipment of PPE on their campus. All institutions have announced how they are going to increase the regular cleaning and disinfecting of the various spaces that students will use. And we'll talk about some of those specific areas here in a little bit. Further, and this is varying again across campus, but campuses are either requiring masking or they're asking when it's not possible for social distancing that the masking be required. I think we've seen that with Purdue, with IU, ISU, Ivy Tech, and Ball State have all in some way, shape, or form said that they need masks on if social distancing isn't possible, or have highly encouraged that process. One of the other common things that we're starting to see across the various reopening plans is the addition of the flu vaccine to the required vaccines for students and staff, with exceptions being provided either due to health or other reasons. This is something new for most of our campus. This is in reaction to the fact that the flu and a potential resurgence of COVID could happen during late fall, early winter, and then into the winter season. And this would help deal with that, with any issues with that. Students and employees are encouraged to take their temperature daily. This is a common theme that we've seen throughout businesses and through the college plans to reopen. And one of the things that we've all realized and we've all dealt with, and as you can see I'm dealing with right now, is the remote work and working from home. And campuses, for varying degrees, are going to utilize remote work to ensure that they're able to socially distance, that it's not as dense on campus once they return. We've all adjusted to this in some way, shape, or form, and the common number that seems to be stated across various plans have been about a third, 30% to a third of administrative staff working remotely. I know that's what President Daniels said in his testimony, and other campuses have indicated the same thing across their various plans, to utilize that to make sure that these remote work options can reduce the number of employees on campus. The next item that has been a common thread in the plans is making sure that students and staff are taking it upon themselves to protect their community, to make sure that they understand the serious nature of COVID-19, and that it is all of our responsibility to prevent spreading the virus to others. The Indiana University system is having employees acknowledge the seriousness of this and what they will do to keep their campus safe. The pledge, or their acknowledgement, is online, an overview of that, as well as Purdue has the Protect Purdue pledge, asking the community members to be vigilant of the health and safety of others, especially those vulnerable populations that we know about, and taking the various precautions needed, masking, social distancing. Ball State also has for their employees a recertification when they're coming to campus to say that they understand what they need to do to safely return to campus. One thing of interest that you may have seen in Inside Higher Ed this week that I wanted to highlight, this is an important time for students to be, finalizing where they're going next year, and even for our juniors to be learning about where they would like to go and learning about the campus. And University of Southern Indiana has introduced something fairly innovative called car tours of campus. This will allow families to come, stay in their car, and have a guided tour from an admissions staffer while they drive around campus. It'll stop at various points on the campus for the students and the families to learn about the various areas of campus and why they might want to come there, talk about residence life, talk about academics. It was a fairly innovative idea that caught the attention of other campuses nationwide. As well as Indiana State's going to utilize their smaller class sizes to make sure that social distancing is available in the classrooms. All of our institutions have announced some sort of hybrid course model. And what that means is really they're pursuing an approach where it would allow in-person instruction, which is the goal, but also to allow for online and remote instruction, especially for those students and faculty who are going to be the most vulnerable, those who might have underlying conditions that would make contracting the virus more dangerous. Each institution is doing this a little bit differently. I mentioned earlier about Ivy Tech continuing after the Thanksgiving break. One of the things that will allow them to do this is a model that they're calling Learn Anywhere, which will allow those students or their students to choose whether they prefer the virtual online or hybrid models where they are actually able to go to class. The Learn Anywhere model you can go to a schedule section. You could be in the same room as faculty, or you could even review recorded lectures to catch up on what you may not have been able to attend. Ball State has been working to turn their courses to what's called high flex models of classes. This will allow them to respond to changing circumstances. Ball State has also done a really good job on their website publishing which courses are, I guess you use easier to teach remotely versus which ones are going to be more difficult to move remotely. And they even have a breakdown of that by their various colleges. And they're working to move to this model to make sure that they're able to be flexible for their students. Again, Indiana University has said that they're going to be using a hybrid model for the foreseeable future. And Indiana State has said that classes will be offered face-to-face with some courses being online. All institutions have said that they are looking for online instruction coming this fall.
See, Josh,
yeah,
you know, typically back when I was in school a long time ago, they had lectures, you know, and with maybe a couple hundred students, and then they'd have the smaller recitations. Are they going to maybe focus more on the smaller groups and maybe not so much on the big lecture hall presentations?
Yeah, I think one of the things that this hybrid model and this online model would allow to happen is you'd still have the lecture hall size class, but an individual could be sitting in their residence hall room and watching it instead of going into the classroom itself. So I know that some campuses are focusing on those smaller class sizes, but through this hybrid model, it will allow for those larger classes and some to attend remotely. And that has been.
How does the professor know you're attending class in your dormitory? Are there techniques?
I'm not sure how each campus is dealing with that. Maybe it's kind of like what we can see here. We can see here on this meeting for Microsoft Teams who's here and who's not. So I don't know if they'll utilize that or if it'll be through a login, or if they won't utilize attendance at that point in time and just go off of your learning.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, you mentioned they're going to have face-to-face in these schools for the first semester, but then in the second semester, they're talking about more remote. Is that because they think there might be another outbreak in the fall? In other words, in the summer, you don't tend to get the flu, but then by around November, you start to see the flu start again. Is that the idea?
Well, I apologize if I said that the spring semester would be remote. What I meant to say was that after Thanksgiving through the end of the semester will be a remote model for most of our institutions. All have indicated that, based on facts on the ground, that they will come back for the spring in a similar manner to what they're doing in the fall.
Oh, okay.
To make the classroom safer, the goal is to limit face-to-face communication and preserve social distancing. All institutions are developing plans based on the classroom type, whether it's a lecture hall, a traditional classroom, and even down to whether the chairs are mobile or not. President Daniels did announce for Purdue that they would be looking at protective measures, including face shields and plexiglass barriers. I think he mentioned that he had ordered a mile of plexiglass barrier, and fairly innovative. As usual, they had a fundraising email about you could help donate to cover plexiglass barriers that are mobile to their alumni. They're going to provide hand sanitizers, various points throughout the buildings and the classrooms. Implement and reduce touch options such as removing doors from cabinets, putting in card access, foot pedals to pull doors open and sensor doors rather than having individuals touch the doors themselves. Increased notices about hygiene and hand washing and where hand washing stations, and outlining specific exits and entrances for students and faculty and staff, pathways for walking, and then marked for social distance. For the residence halls, Purdue has said that they're going to reduce the resident hall density to provide at least 100 square feet of space per student. Moreover, they've said enough space will be allowed for a 6-foot radius per person, as well as bed placement will be at least 10 feet apart when considering a foot from the headboard. USI has announced that housing will open with a maximum of 80% occupancy. And IU announced that all of the residence halls will be single occupancy, but with an exemption process if you want to pick your own roommate, or if you want to pick the person you would live with. The big thing around food service has again been de-densifying, fewer students in there at the same time. And our campuses have almost universally talked about more grab and go, not traditional sitting at the large benches together, but grab and go options. And they're going to do this by increasing the number of venues that qualify for the plan, increasing the number of grab and goes options, extending food service hours to reduce the crowding at the meal times. The lines for food would be marked for social distancing, eliminating reusable kitchen items, that ketchup bottle that you might pass around rather than having that. They'll replace it with single-use items. And then physical barriers at cash registers, as well as prepay availability for a lot of our students, so then individuals don't have to have that interaction once they go to pick up their food. The institution has also announced various plans for testing and isolating individuals. So if they have a symptomatic individual, they're all working to be able to make testing accessible to students. And have the ability to isolate the symptomatic students on campus. They have announced various plans to either reserve residence hall floors or rooms or buildings and off-campus housing to isolate the COVID-19 positive patients. Talking about how they're going to transfer individuals to testing, how you're going to move them around so they're not exposing more individuals if they are either symptomatic and potentially positive, or if they have tested positive. Wanted to highlight Indiana University has been very specific in what their plan would be, and that they stated that students who test positive will quarantine for 10 days after the onset of symptoms, and then after 72 hours of being fever-free without fever-reducing medications. They would quarantine roommates and close contact students of positive students, or close contacts of students who have tested positive for at least 14 days. And all of our institutions have been working with the State Department of Health to talk about contact tracing and testing and help with this effort, as well as some have talked about supplementing the contact tracing on their own campus.
Wow.
So I know I covered a lot in a very short amount of time. I think I was supposed to cover that in about 15 minutes and I came fairly close. I know that there's a lot more information for each of our institutions. And if you go to the website that Liz provided earlier on, it has a link to the coronavirus websites for all of our institutions. And they have detailed information broken down by faculty, students, and staff for individuals who would like further information. Additionally, our government reps who are likely on the line here are happy to answer any questions if you want to reach out to them after the meeting.
Let me ask, we take temperatures of everybody every day when they come to work. That's probably not going to be possible with the students, or is that being considered by some institutions?
There have been discussions about temperature taking, and a lot of this is a personal responsibility aspect, saying, if you're going to be on campus, you need to do the things to protect the students around you. Some campuses may choose to do temperature testing at the doors of the buildings. I haven't seen that for most of them. A lot of this has been around that self-certification, that self-awareness that you're doing this to protect those who are around you. So it's a possibility. Nobody has announced that it's fully going to be their plan yet.
Okay.
Josh, are these slides available?
Yes, and I can, whenever, if you just want this section, I can send this out. I can also send you links to all the various plans. You know, they range from 100 pages to 50 pages. There's all kinds of information about the various openings that they're doing.
Murphy, I'd love this section.
All right, I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Josh. If you could give up control of the screen for me.
I'm trying to hand it back over right now.
It's okay.
There you go.
I'll just say too, thank you. I'll just say too that these slides in there are 77 slides in this deck. It's pretty comprehensive. This is available online right now. So for those watching, you're able to pull this down from the commission's website now. And Chris and other members, you have a direct link to this file in the email I sent you yesterday. So if you want to look at that right now, of course, feel free to do that. And as Josh said, he'll be following up with additional information as you need.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our the fiscal side of things, and I'll ask Alexa to continue on our conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, as Liz said, I'm going to go over the fiscal implications that COVID-19 has had on the commission. Okay. The State Budget Agency released the fiscal year 21 reserve policy memo in May, announcing that the state missed its general fund tax revenue by approximately $1 billion in April of 2020. The December 2019 revenue forecast estimated revenues to be almost $2.2 billion, but actual revenues came in closer to $1.2 billion. This is about 44% less than predicted.
Wow.
As the need for government services continues to grow, higher unemployment and less economic activity will lead to lower than forecasted state revenue collections. The State Budget Agency expects that the state's revenue will continue to come under forecast for the remaining 14 months of the biennium or through June of 21. According to...
Excuse me for interrupting. Just to make sure I understand that slide. It looked like it's saying that in May, they announced the state of missed general tax fund revenue by approximately $1 billion in April 2020. That's in just April, just that month?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not over the March, April time period. And they're forecasting being under over that 14-month biennium. Did they indicate a number of how far under they think they're going to be?
No, they didn't indicate that.
Okay. I just
the $1 billion miss was the month of the most tax revenues come in. So, I mean, it really was tied to individual tax returns and when those are processed. They're substantially behind on the processing of returns right now. So that was a big part of it. But you saw it also across all the other lines. Sales tax revenues are down. Obviously, casino revenues are nil. I mean, it was pretty much across the board. Gasoline revenues are down. But the biggest element of that $1 billion miss was corporate and individual income tax.
And yet those filings weren't due yet either. They were extended.
That's correct. Yeah, those have been deferred. That's exactly right, through July 15th. Yeah. So some of that will get made up. However, obviously the sales tax revenue and some of those gas tax revenues probably will not be recouped.
That's right.
Yeah, I think they won't be recouped. I do think as you have they'll continue to be off the forecast, but it may not be as much off as it was as people go back to work and as you have some of those other operations beginning to open up again. But there's going to be huge gaps.
Right, and the unemployment claims also is going to be a huge hit because part of that's paid by the state and part of it by the feds. But that'll be a big additional expense that was not anticipated.
Right. Yeah, according to the April 2020 employment briefing presentation put on by the Indiana Department of Workforce Development, Indiana had over 640,000 initial unemployment claims, filed from March 14th to May 2nd of 2020. This is a 16.9% unemployment rate. Although COVID-19 hit hard near the end of the fiscal year, there's already been a significant fiscal impact on state agencies during this fiscal year already. The State Budget Agency announced policies via the Financial Management Circular 2020-2 cost saving measures on April 20th of 2020. As a higher demand for services and lower revenue collections will exert a significant strain on the state's resources, the State Budget Agency announced policies for state agency spending effective immediately and until revised or rescinded. These policies are put in place to ensure that funding is available to maintain and support critical services and operations in light of the conditions that we're facing. The policies fall under the following areas of spending: budget management, personnel, procurement, communications, physical space, and operational cost savings. I am going to review the items under each area that most are relevant to the commission, but I can also provide the actual circular to you at the end of this meeting if you want to see it more in detail. So budget management, state agencies have been asked to maximize their reversion in their general funds. Our reserve for this year is 2%, but we will be able to exceed that for most of our operating funds. We are to prioritize the use of certain funds, federal and then dedicated, to accomplish this. Personnel, all personnel actions require review by the Strategic Hiring Committee. And there's a freeze on hiring requests unless our agency determines and the Strategic Hiring Committee agrees that filling the position is essential to addressing the COVID-19 public health emergency. Paid internship programs are suspended. Agencies are obviously able to continue to utilize unpaid internships. We are also asked to evaluate the use of contractors and temporary employees. Procurement. We are to scrutinize our contracts and find opportunities to renegotiate terms and cost. Carefully review certain expenditures to identify appropriate savings. Limit travel expenses. Some ways we can do this is minimize the number of state employees traveling to conferences and training seminars. Those 1 or 2 employees can go to the conferences and bring back the information to other employees. Another way we can do it is only limit overnight stays to out-of-state travel deemed essential. In-state travel should rarely require an overnight stay.
And to be quite honest, Alexa, this is Teresa, there's no out-of-state travel taking place. I mean, almost all the conventions, conferences, everything that we participated have been either totally eliminated or they're doing them virtually. So really no out-of-state travel is taking place right now.
Right. Alternatives to travel, such as teleconferences and webinars, should be considered in all cases. Communications, we are to strive to reduce printing where possible. For example, printing on both sides. We should evaluate the need to create paper publications and reports and other information that can be posted to websites and distributed electronically. We should do that if allowable. Physical space, we should minimize the cost for internal and external meetings. Again, utilize video conferencing and webinar tools when available and appropriate. Minimize the cost for conferences. Limit the number of conferences agencies host to the greatest extent possible. In summary, state agencies are being asked to evaluate their current operations and identify any activities that can be targeted for elimination or somehow reduce the cost. Financial Management Circular 2020-2 required agencies to submit a strategic plan that demonstrates our ability to meet the reserve target in fiscal year 2020, in our fiscal year spending plan for fiscal year 2021. We submitted this on June 9th. So fiscal year 2021 impact, although the circular came out in fiscal year 2020, it is active until revised or rescinded. So it's going to have an even greater impact on our 2021 reserves and spending. In order to ensure that the state has sufficient funding to maintain its most critical programs, SBA has placed a 15% reserve target on all functions of our agency, and this includes both general fund and dedicated fund appropriations. And just for reference, our fiscal year 20 reserve is 2%. Fiscal year 19 reserve was 3%, and fiscal year 18 the reserve was 3% as well. Our strategic plan that we submitted to the state budget agency, we requested exemptions on the reserves on some of our funds. Some of these funds include our financial aid funds and other dedicated funds that typically have an exemption. The reserves will have a large impact on our operating activities. The state budget agency notified us that they would be able to let us know if they are approving or denying our exemptions by mid to late June. So we won't know until then what exemptions we have.
So Alexa, can I just ask this question here? And if you're going to cover it as you continue, I'll step aside, but I just want to make sure I understand this. So 15% is pretty significant. And there's an operating side to that. And then we've got all these funds and scholarships. And I'm assuming what you're saying is the requests for exemption would be on those dedicated funds and scholarship plans. But on the actual operating budget of the organization, is that just expected to be a 15% cut across the board, which I'm assuming your greatest expense is personnel. So that there's some tough decisions to be made.
Right.
What's going on? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. The exemptions are being placed on our financial aid funds and scholarship funds. And yeah, our operating funds are where most of our personnel expenses come out of. And we will have to have a 15% reserve on those. But and then that leads me to the next slide, which is our spending plan. So due to these circumstances, our spending plan will be presented at the next Budget and Productivity Committee meeting, which is not until July. So it will then be voted on in the August commission meeting.
Alexa, this is Teresa. We will have more information. This is, as she's saying, this is awkward because, what we should be doing is you should be approving this month before, and we wouldn't be doing it in August, but this is such a moving target that what we're trying to do is provide the best information to you and then also, meet the deadlines that are given to us by the state budget folks. I would say that, while the majority of the exemption will be for financial aid that we're looking for, there are a few other operational things that we're looking for exemptions from are not at the highest level. So some of the marketing thing that we think are directly tied to our work and we can't lose it. So we will be making a case for some of those. I'll say this publicly because this is what I have been told is that we have to go through the paperwork to do it. But our belief is that financial aid will not have the 15% hold on the financial aid. And we've been very pointed in talking to them about the need for affordability. We have to go through the process of doing the paperwork, but indications to me have been that hold would not be on financial aid.
Yeah, and we will be continuing to watch enrollment trends to see how they do affect our financial aid funds. And then also institutions will be submitting their financial impact survey shortly. We sent them a survey asking the financial impact of COVID-19. So they should be getting those back to us soon. So that's all I have.
There'll be a tendency for schools to want to raise tuition. That could be too, to make up for the lack.
Well, I think there's a very strong sensitivity to that on the part of campuses. They understand that, yes, they're struggling. And, without going into deep detail, while this 15% reserve isn't on institutions, we should anticipate that there will be cuts into the appropriation for institutions as well. Yeah. So, but I think to go to tuition increases would be a very tough thing for their students to be facing right now. So all this will be worked through, but there's a heightened sensitivity to the affordability issue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Teresa, you can close out our COVID-19 discussion with an overview of rapid recovery.
Yes, I mean, so we have just provided, I know, so much information. Part of the reason why we extended this an hour this afternoon is that we haven't had the chance to be with you. I apologize that we've just inundated you with information, but we felt it was really important for you to have a sense of what's going on. And I hope you, as always, feel comfortable asking questions either now or later. But we're not going to be we're not together in July, and so we really felt like we needed to provide as much information to you as possible. So thanks for your listening and good questions. I wanted to provide just a high-level view of the rapid recovery for a better future that we have been talking about. I'm sure we've been trying to provide information to you over the course of the last 2.5 months as this planning work has been taking place. So I don't think it's a surprise, but just wanted to provide a little more information because this is at the very center of so much of our work. Alexa mentioned the 650,000 unemployment claims. We're actually now, those were the numbers at that point. We're now well over 700,000. The number of ongoing claims that people are filing that are being paid every week is more, over 200,000. But, we know that this is unprecedented. When the last time we were together, we were talking about a 3.2 unemployment rate, and now we're nearly at 17%. And so that has huge implications on state budgets and on people's lives. And so, my other hat that I've been wearing for the last year or so is the chair of the governor's workforce cabinet. And it is through that group that we've really been trying to provide a path forward for people. I joined the governor last Thursday for his regularly scheduled news conference to provide an update of what we're doing with rapid recovery. I have been saying for months that all of the work that we are doing, understandably, on making sure that people are dealing with the health issues of COVID-19, we don't need to do those sequentially, take care of people's health and then take care of people's livelihoods, but that we need to do those together because there are huge health implications for high unemployment rates. And, people are, fairly desperate. I mean, that extra $600 that has been paid to people for filing unemployment goes away in July, on July 26th. So there will be an even greater sense of urgency then. And so when you think about this, what you hope is that people will go back to their employer, and many will. We don't know exactly how many, but we know people already are. But some cases, people will go back to an employer where the job may have changed in some ways. They've been forced to be more productive during this time by using automation, for example. And so has the job changed? We know that you can't walk downtown Indianapolis or any place else around the state and not know there are a lot of businesses that aren't coming back right now, so that people don't have a place to go back. And we also know that there are people, who will say, I don't want to be this vulnerable in the future, so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to look at a different skill. And those are the kinds of issues that we've been dealing with the rapid recovery work. The good news is that I actually think that we're uniquely prepared to deal with this. It was very, not knowing this, but the creation of the governor's workforce cabinet has actually been bringing together employers and educators and philanthropy and community leaders to really look at this alignment between the skills that we need in the 21st century. So I think that's been very helpful, and it gave us a vehicle to actually have people meeting. So we had a group meeting, a subset of the Governor's Workforce Cabinet, which consisted of the Department of Workforce Development, the Governor's Workforce Cabinet Executive Director, Ivy Tech and Vincennes, the Commission, Blair Milo, who leads the talent group, Career Connections and Talent. And we've been assisted with funding on the plan from Strata and the assistance from Thomas P. Miller and Associates working on this. So we have been, busy working 2 and 3 times, meeting every week to talk about this. Not only do we have the Governor's Workforce Cabinet that was active, but through the state's Next Level Jobs program, we were able to scale the good work that we were already doing. So through the Workforce Ready grant, we've already connected about 25,000 Hoosiers to high demand tuition-free certificate programs, nearly 12,000 Hoosiers who have completed an eligible certificate program. And I think this is a really important number, with a median annual wage gain for those who completed of $6,400. So, I mean, that's a significant wage gain to people who have completed one of those certificates. The companion piece to this, as you know, is we've been seeing successful results from the employer training grant, where more than 530 employers have been served and have trained over 9,000 either current employees or new employees who they hire. So these are very successful programs and have seen very positive results. But we now know that we have thousands more Hoosiers. Sometimes people ask me, what's changed about this program from what we were already doing? Well, what's changed is thousands and thousands of new people who need these skills more than ever. And so we were able to announce last Thursday that $50 million in the federal funding through CARES would be available to scale these programs. And so we're prepared to, work alongside employers and Hoosiers to really help them skill up. It's a very people-focused program. So while we've had the work going on to figure out how we use the federal dollars and how we ensure that employers are prepared, we've sort of been the people side of this. How do we make sure that people have a path forward and that they're prepared for this time? And we've also, really thought that rather than this be just about government programs, that we need to make sure that employers and community leaders and faith-based organizations, philanthropic groups, who are really trusted sources of information, are engaged with us, and that's how people really will learn about the programs, and it may be that the encouragement that they need to actually come back. So we're really developing these community and faith-based organizations with the understanding that they now know about these programs as well. Another way that Hoosiers will really learn about those resources is through this new online hub, which connects Hoosiers to the job resources, the training, in a very simple way. They can go, and as you can see before you right now, they're looking for a new job, education and training, or other support. Those other supports could be transportation, childcare, unemployment information. And once they hit one of those very simple icons, it then drives them in a simple way to those kinds of resources that are available to them that they would need. Visitors to the site can also talk to a real person to answer questions, to help them determine their best path forward. We've been working with our partners at Invested. Remember, Invested is what used to be the Indiana secondary market. They've branded themselves now with this, with Invested. In the past, and really primarily their mission has been to help students in high school to really have the financial tools to access higher education. But they came quickly and were willing to expand their mission and make a contribution of their own funding to help affected Hoosiers, adults who needed help with the Workforce Ready grant. Since launching their initiative just 3 weeks ago, they've engaged nearly 3,000 Hoosiers, and they're committed to continuing this at this point. We've also been working with career coaches through the Indiana Work One offices the governor's initiative through Skillful, and Ivy Tech's career coaching and employer connection initiative as well, so that it's organized and in a way that is simple and really very friendly to the user. So, you know, all of this is really with the goal to help Hoosiers take the next step. Not sure why that's reverberating on me here, but to help them get a new job quickly. So I want to talk just a minute about the $50 million funding plan that we've put in place. You know, we're prepared to continue some of this with especially the credit-bearing part of Workforce Ready grants that we tend to pay for with the Pell grants. But the skills training part that is often non-credit, we've actually had to use the small amount of state funding that we had for those because we can't use Pell dollars for those. So the majority of this $50 million that we're talking about will actually help with short-term certificates in the skills area, helping people get an immediate job, and then also with an eye toward those areas that are really emerging as of great need in the economy. So think of technology and healthcare and advanced manufacturing. So in general, although the announcement was just the $50 million, we are working with the state budget agency right now to distribute the dollars in the following way. $22 million would come to the commission for the scaling of the Workforce Ready grant, of which the majority would actually be shared in partnership with the Department of Workforce Development for skills training. $3 million would go directly to the Department of Workforce Development to bring what's called 180 skills, and which would be delivered through the Work One offices, which is especially strong in logistics and manufacturing, but also provides employability skills to people who are unemployed. The reach would be about 100,000 people through that $3 million in Work One offices. We would increase the funding to the employer training grant by $15 million. And so currently an employer can get only a maximum of $50,000 or $5,000 per employee. It would go to $100,000 per employer and $10,000 per employee to train their incumbent or new workers who come to them and are trained. We would spend about $1 million to upskill our marketing campaign, which would come to the commission. We would spend about $8 million that would go to the governor's workforce cabinet for all of these career coaching and navigation programs that are already in place but need to be scaled up. And then we would spend about $1 million to do what you're all familiar with, which we've referred to as prior learning assessments, to find real ways to assess and give credit, advanced standing, or a better job opportunity to people based on what they've already known, what they've learned in perhaps non-academic settings. So prior learning assessment. So that's how we are planning to spend the money. We know that the Strata surveys show that our underrepresented populations, Black and Latino Americans, and rural communities have been most affected by COVID-19. So we'll be doubling down on our outreach and our employer training efforts in those areas. I mentioned that we've been working with community faith-based and philanthropic organizations. We've been in contact with about 100 community faith-based and organizations. We think this is a powerful, sort of an ecosystem on the ground network to help Hoosiers where they are to get the encouragement that they need to go forward. And then another area, of course, is working with employers to ensure that the transitions back to the workforce are as simple as possible. The Indiana Chamber of Commerce has joined these rapid recovery efforts through its newly created Institute for Workforce Excellence. They're providing free on-demand webinars. IB Tech is providing 10,000 free courses to people who come and actually come back and get these courses during the course of this period. The Chamber is also focused on mental health services through their Wellness Council, and emphasis on the work that they do through Indiana Internet to make sure that internships continue in some way. So I think hopefully you get a flavor of all of the things that are going on, but the important thing is that we are really coordinating them in a way, simplifying the message, reaching people where they are. The other challenge for us is that while these efforts will continue, the funding of $50 million from CARES dollars at this point has to be spent by the end of the year. So that's a huge challenge for us to move this quickly through. So these are going to have to be credentials that people get in a quick period of time that enables them to go back into the workplace quickly as well. I suppose there's a possibility that the federal government could extend this, but we don't know that. So at this point, we have to deal with what we have. I'm going to stop there and ask, I'll make one other comment. We are now in the process of implementation stage of rapid recovery. And that really, I've focused it around 3 C's, which is first, the identification of what new certificates will we add. And so we have been working with Ivy Tech and Vincennes and the Department of Workforce Development to identify those certificates that maybe weren't covered before, but we know now that they can get somebody a good job. So we're identifying new certificates. We're doubling down on our communication plan and our marketing and our outreach, and then really giving life to this community faith-based part of this that we're talking about, and bringing those folks together with probably another news conference down the road when we really talk about on the ground leaders who will help us in this area as well. So I'm going to stop, and then our chairman has been very engaged in this work as well as a member of this economic recovery group that's been looking at the CARES dollars. And Mr. Chairman, you may have some additional comments that you want to make on this effort, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Well, thanks, Teresa. This is all incredibly exciting, and the task force on which I serve, there were 6 of us. The governor appointed to it to help advise him on how to spend the $2.4 billion that came from the CARES Act directly to the state government. And without question, we are all extremely enthusiastic about, and particularly the governor, this initiative. And the good news is that Teresa and her team have been preparing for this the last several months. And so when we turned to Teresa and her team and suggested that, given the high unemployment rates and the need for a number of working age members of our community to find new vocational opportunities, she was ready to jump in. And so I know the governor is extremely excited about this opportunity, and it's what makes it extremely difficult is there is this December 30th deadline that the money has to be spent. I do think there's a reasonable chance that if there is another bill that passes Congress on the whole COVID situation, that they will liberalize the rules on the $2.4 billion, and I certainly hope that happens. But in the meantime, I know that Teresa and her team are working extremely hard to accelerate this process, and it's an opportunity for the unskilled in our state to become skilled, and hopefully that's going to happen in very large numbers. So anyway, Teresa, you've done a great job. We did not give her much time to prepare, but she was already prepared, and so it worked out extremely well. Just to give you an example, on Wednesday last week, I said, Teresa, there's a good chance the governor is going to announce this on Friday, but we just don't know. She said, well, it would be nice to know. Well, I think she found out on Thursday that it was going to be announced on Friday, but if anyone watched her, she did a fantastic job. So anyway, we're excited about it.
I think the important thing is, you have, millions and millions of dollars that are coming to states to spend to, jumpstart the economy. What we wanted to do was use that money in a really effective way that was life-changing for people, not just fun things because you have the money, but fun things that make a difference, that actually give somebody an opportunity to have a better wage, that they're contributors to employers and to our state. So we have felt a huge responsibility that when this funding comes, that we have metrics that really measure that it's being well spent. It's not just, we're not just throwing money out there, but we're spending money in a responsible way, which I think is the only way to do it.
You know, I don't really have any questions on this, but I do have a comment, and I would just like to commend Al, Teresa, you and your team on really the work that you're doing to benefit the citizens of this state during an incredibly difficult time. The amount of time and effort that's been put in really unselfishly to help kind of guide us through and come up with a plan and move forward in an effective, efficient way is remarkable. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, I would say it's breathtaking what you've done. I mean, it's just amazing that, and the challenge is great, and what you've done, I'd second what we've just heard. I think it's great. Thanks.
Thanks to both of you.
Now's the hard part, implementation.
Right.
So
well, for each of you in your own corners, as members of the commission, as employers, as ambassadors, as community leaders, you know, whatever you can do to help. I mean, every person you contact who didn't know about these opportunities to be skilled up and you tell them makes a difference. I think for a lot of people, it's going to be a one-on-one thing where somebody says, did you know you could go back and, you know, get a certificate in cybersecurity or get a certificate in one of these areas? And, you know, I think, so we'll keep sharing information with you, and in your individual corners, if you'll keep helping us do that, we would appreciate it. And with that, I think Liz is ready to probably have us move on to the next item. Al, Mr. Chairman, if you're ready for that.
I am ready. And let me just, again, encourage everyone to be an ambassador for this effort. And I know Teresa is going to be investing a lot of time and effort and dollars in a marketing plan to try to reach out to every citizen that could benefit from this opportunity. I mean, these are tuition-free opportunities to become skilled and dramatically improve your standard of living. And so this is so important to our state. So our next item is Indiana Attainment Academy. And Teresa or Liz, one of you is going to lead this, I think.
Well, I will start, and I think we're going to sort of tag team this because Liz is our point person on the staff to actually be helping us with this work. This is an academy that has been jointly sponsored by State Higher Education Executive Officers and an organization called Education Strategy Group. We've worked with ESG on many programs through the years, and they're very, very successful. They do a lot of work with both Illumina and Strata. They came together to ask 7 states to participate in the academy, which really was focused on looking at this, you know, attainment issue and how we were going to move the attainment numbers. Not surprisingly, we're getting closer to that 2025 60% goal, and how are we actually going to expand our opportunities to reach those that goal. So we were, as you can see in the slide before you, we joined California, Michigan, Tennessee, New Jersey, Louisiana, and North Carolina. We've met in person, and then since then, of course, we were scheduled to meet again, but we're not going to be able to meet together as a group, but we are meeting virtually. The important work, though, is really taking place with the state teams. So yes, it's great to get together and share ideas with other states, but as I've often said, there is so much that is unique to individual states that the really important work is being done with our team. And our team consists of the people right before you. We have everything from the K-12 sector represented by a high school principal, Dwight Ashley, the legislators represented by the chairman of the House Education Committee, Bob Baining, 4-year institutions represented by our host today, President Curtis, our 2-year institutions represented by Sue Ellspermann, the governor's office represented by the senior advisor to the governor on education issues, Katie Jenner, our hand in glove partner on all of this work, Fred Payne at the Department of Workforce Development. Mary Jane, both her experience at the commission and her current role at Ivy Tech has been instrumental in working on the implementation of this. Liz has been our facilitator here, and then another former staffer, Sarah Ansel, who most of you remember, who has her own company right now, has been sort of detailed to us to help our team work on these efforts. So we have our high-level priorities. I'm going to go through the high-level priorities, and then I'm going to turn it over to Liz to go through the strategic plan alignment. So really what we've been looking at are how do we actually address this need for more post-secondary credentials. And so some of that will be done by increasing the number of credentials that are actually gained by high school students, either through career and technical education or through the 30 credit hour general education core, so that more students are prepared to go on to access higher education or leave high school with some sort of an industry certification if they go straight into the world of work. We've been focused on, as many states have, on increasing our FAFSA filing. And, you know, this COVID-19 thing has thrown a lot of our efforts at the Attainment Academy into a disarray, and certainly FAFSA as well. But we've been successful, I think, in, you know, maintaining and picking up some speed. Although, as Colby mentioned, we are concerned about a drop-off with our low-income student with FAFSA, and so we will be looking at ways to increase the likelihood that students know about the importance of filling out the FAFSA. You may recall we had some legislation last year. We have some memorandums of understanding that we're working with the schools right now in the K-12 sector, but really need to do a better job there. Overall, once students get there, we need to make sure that more of them complete. So just overall working on our completion rates at our 2- and 4-year institutions and the credentials that are gained. And then, you know, even if we do a great job with the high school going on, if we do a great job with our 2- and 4-year institutions, we know that those attainment numbers will be marked also by the number of adults who come back and get a credential. You know, the work that we just talked about with the Workforce Ready grant is certainly helping us in that area. And we also are looking at how, you know, what's been accelerated by COVID-19 is how we actually look at connectivity, devices, and quality online instruction, and how the Attainment Academy can be helpful in that regard. So with that, I will turn it over to Liz to talk about some of the specific strategies that we have here in Indiana.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as we've been saying, the work of the Attainment Academy is aligned in so many ways to the strategic plan, certainly around just the general premise to increase attainment, but there's actually some very targeted strategies that are in the current Indiana plan for the Attainment Academy that I wanted to highlight for you. It's funny, I can almost pull these word for word from our strategic plan, so I just wanted to show you just the great alignment that we have here. First being that, you know, one of the primary priorities of this plan is to increase the number of post-secondary credentials awarded in high school, and all of the various action items supported by that. But that very premise is one of the, you know, that's almost a word for word from an item in our strategic plan. The Attainment Academy plan also focuses on expanding the pipeline of dual credit teachers. There is a greater focus on ensuring our students have access to dual credit in our strategic plans. So that is certainly some alignment there. Increasing FAFSA completion in high schools, certainly by leveraging our partnerships, whether it's banks or working in a greater way with Invested. They've been a great partner so far this year, and just continuing to leverage those partnerships. Offering targeted support to students through intrusive advising practices, and whether that's you know, all manner of ways that can do that, but that's again another pulled almost directly from our strategic plan. Reducing equity gaps, obviously we have an entire section dedicated to equity, looking at that issue very carefully. It's actually a theme throughout the Attainment Academy plan. Every every one of the priorities has a very targeted message of how are you addressing equity through these 5 priorities. So that's certainly something we're considering as we move forward with this. Defining a credential of value, creating an inventory, and looking at our attainment calculation. If you recall, we have 3 key metrics at the back of our strategic plan, one of those being tracking completion. And we gave a charge to ourselves to look at the credentials that were included in that attainment calculation. So that's the same thing, just looking at what is considered a credential of value and potentially expanding the definition that Indiana holds to that, to include all manner of things and include more students in that calculation outside of census. So those are all things that we've talked about at the Attainment Academy meetings. And finally, investigate and address disparities in technology, internet access. Again, this is one of those equity strategies that we have put a strong emphasis on addressing in our strategic plan. So happy to take any questions, and certainly happy to send around in better detail the Attainment Academy plan itself. It's almost finalized. We have our last, I'll just go ahead to the next slide and we can take any questions, of course, but our next meeting is actually next week. We'll be looking at this plan pretty much one last time, determining our first main steps for implementation. We'll submit this final action plan to SHU and ESG by the end of the month. And we will have another national meeting in September. And before the pandemic occurred, that would have been an in-person experience that may be virtual. But at any rate, we'll still gather with all other participating states and report on our progress in implementing this work. So with that, happy to take any questions.
The word academy, could you use the word council? I mean, the academy sounds like a school, but it's a group of people getting together. Isn't it more like a consortium or I just was curious about the use of the word academy.
That's an interesting point. We didn't name it, the ESG and SHIO did. I think it was because it is a working group. And maybe in that sense, it's a learning and working group that we learn from each other, and then you actually have to do some work on it. And it's, the knowledge of what we're doing is in terms of what that particular our group does it's really an insider thing. The result is, do we do something that matters then to people who are actually serving, who won't even know about the academy necessarily, but they'll know if the academy is successful because it'll make a difference.
Yeah. It's kind of a silly question, I guess.
No, I think it's important to highlight again. I mean, we walked through the participants of this academy, and it's all the same. It's all the same folks, all the same players that have been engaged in all of the rapid recovery work. I mean, there's a lot of alignment happening right now in our state between. Seems like they're all separate initiatives, but at their core, they are all working toward the same thing and on the same path. So I think that's important to mention.
I would love to see the work product you mentioned that y'all are going to have, if that's possible to distribute.
Absolutely.
Around.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll need a day or two to take it out of a Google Doc form and put it into a shareable format. But as soon as that's done, I'll be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, no rush. Great.
We might wait and share it with you after our June 16th meeting when we see if there are any other changes to it and share it at that point. So. So Liz, we probably need, and Mr. Chairman, we probably need to move on. We still have a few things to complete and we're running short on time.
Yeah, so the college readiness report from Charlie and Jake.
And I'm trying to unmute here.
Whoop. And I'm trying to pull up a slide. Hold on, folks.
You're pulling it up, Liz, right?
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
Aha.
And now I'll present.
Okay, take it away, Jake.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining everyone virtually. Sorry that we can't do this in person like we did last time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lubbers, Commission members, and Commission staff. Good afternoon. I'm Jake Burns, Assistant Director of Data Management, and I'm pleased to again present with my friend and colleague, Charlie Baser, our Communications Director. We are happy to be with you this afternoon to present together the 2020 College Readiness Report, which was published a few weeks ago. We're going to share the key takeaways, some highlights, and the data stories that are in this report.
And again, all of this is online, so being mindful of time, we're going to try to go through it pretty quickly. If you have questions, please let us know. So similar to the, there we go, to the 2020 College Value Report, we have given a fresh look to the readiness report to align with reaching higher in a state of change. Additionally, this time we've started with an introductory letter from the commissioner along with key takeaways and a data overview. Again, we're talking right now about the state report. You can also find school, county breakouts on our website, and we're going to go through all that in just a second. So again, the objective here is to present this data and information in a reader-friendly format so that administrators, policymakers, students, and families can have a better understanding of how policy is shaping education outcomes.
And like we had with our CVR report, like we presented, we had some key goals that we wanted you to take away with. So today's key goals that we want you to learn and keep in mind are: 1, Indiana high school students are entering college are choosing more rigorous programs. Secondly, 21st century college going rates remain high. And thirdly, different pathways to college help high school students succeed.
Okay, and so you may be thinking, what is the readiness report? And it's been about a year probably since you've had this presented to you, and it's my first readiness report since I've been in the commission. So we do, obviously provide a lot of papers and reports throughout the year. You can find a helpful synopsis page of all the different reports that we do in the very back page of both the readiness report and the college value report. So if you're looking to share that information, it also now includes hyperlinks. So you can, if you're on a digital format, you can click right to whatever report you're looking for. One other fun thing, I'm going to geek out about this for a second, is we have included some vanity URL shortcuts. So if you're looking, I know this sort of harkens back to, I think, Commissioner Bev's comments a couple of meetings ago about having a hard time finding the reports. And so you can actually go and type in the CHE website with /readiness, and it will take you right here. And you can do that with all of our reports now as well. So the College Readiness Report provides information about Indiana students' college preparation, access, and performance. And we look at that through the statewide lens, by county, by corporation, and by school. So you'll be able to find a breakdown of all high school graduates who go to college within 1 year of graduation, where they go to college, whether it's public, private, in-state, out-of-state, what they're studying, degree type, program type, status, full-time or part-time, and also how they're prepared. So remediation rates, academic performance, grade point average, and the number of credits they're earning. Additionally, college success is based on persistence, remediation, and completing the attempted college coursework.
So the biggest chart, and the one that everyone really focuses on first, is the 2020 Indiana College Readiness Report, which the rate is showing a decline over the several years in the statewide college going rate, with a 61% of Indiana high school graduates enrolling in college within a year of graduation in 2018. This is compared to 65% in 2015. One of the reasons behind this is because of the positive economic outlook that was happening in 2018 at the time. What this chart also shows in gray is that the college going rate of 21st century scholars is continuing to increase and is still remaining high at 86%. You can see that as compared to 2014, has gone up from 77%. In contrast, and below the blue line, which was the college going rate for the state average, is the college going rate for non-scholars. This is not broken down by income level, but we'll touch about that in a few slides. You can see for non-scholars, the college going rate is just 58%.
That's right. And so another important part of this conversation is how well students are prepared when they are leaving high school and going on to college. So 94% of students who earn what we call the STGEC, Statewide General Transfer Education Corps, which is a transferable block of 30 credits, they enroll in college, and most of them stay in the state of Indiana. Additionally, high school graduates who earn more rigorous diplomas are more likely to go to college. As you can see here in the middle chart, 91% of academic honors diploma earners enroll, compared to just 15% of general diploma holders. This trend continues from previous readiness report results. Additionally, a majority of Hoosiers earn AP or dual credit when they're in high school. So one of the things that should be kind of highlighted in this is, although the overall college going rate has declined slightly over the past several years, the college going rates remain high for learners on pathways that the Commission supports, such as through the 21st Century Scholars Program, which Jake was just talking about, as well as the STGEC and dual credit.
Gaps are present in college access with regard to race and ethnicity, socio and economic status, geography, and gender. Here we have a breakdown of race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status, and we'll get to the other two on the next slide. You can see that Black and Hispanic high school graduates are the least likely to go to college, followed by the other category. White and Asian students are the most likely to attend college. As mentioned previously, the college going rate for low-income non-scholars is just 38%. So those are individuals that are impoverished but did not qualify for the 21st Century Scholar. Their higher income non-scholar peers go to college at 68%. And again, the scholars rate has remained at 86%.
Briefly, I'll touch on the rural and non-rural and the gender breakouts as well, because that's also present in this report. As you can see on the chart on the left, educational attainment rates. Educational attainment is more of a challenge for rural areas. And I know you've all heard the commissioner talk about this before and had these discussions as well yourselves, but they are attending college at a lower rate than their non-rural peers. On the right side, you can see that females are more likely to go to college than male students, and this trend has not changed dramatically over the past 5 years.
A quick question.
Sure.
If you go back 2 slides to the minority students, do you have the trend line for those as well? I mean, are we making progress, not making progress? I'm curious by group, by ethnicity.
The college going gap, that is something that we do not have the trend as of right now, but that's something that we can get to you after this meeting.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. And then on the slide, your next slide, I do think that's very concerning in regard to our rural areas, and this declining male participation is not healthy, I think, for our society. And it's worth discussions on what we might do to try to improve that as well. Thank you.
May I also ask a question? Can you break down the socioeconomic aspects by race? I'm looking at the race for those that are 21st century scholars. So we're looking at, before you take the whole group and you show who are Hispanic, who are white, who are African American, and then you show the students who are in the program or 21st Century Scholars Program, but you don't break them down in the same way. Do we have that data?
That we have that data, and in our equity report, which should be published later this summer to early fall, one of the things that we really want to focus on is the intersectionality of race and socioeconomic status. So that is exactly to your point. I think it was Commission Member Murphy that asked that question. So we'll definitely break down by, our Black or African American 21st century scholars what is their college going rate.
That'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, concerning the rural, I suppose if you've grown up on a farm, you start to learn to farm when you're young, and you figure, look, I know how to farm. I know how to run all this equipment. I know how to plant. I know what seed to. They don't think spending 4 years away at college is necessary. Is that kind of the attitude you think? Is that what you're looking at?
You know, I think it's many things of which that could be a part of it. I do think that you don't have as many small farms as you used to. You have a consolidation in farming, just like you've had in other places. So the opportunities, I think, are more limited for families in small farms, for one thing. I think the sophistication of farming is very different than it used to be, whether it's how crops are rotated to the equipment that you use. So much like other things, I'm not sure that, in fact, I'm fairly confident that today's farming is not like farming was 50 years ago. Yeah. And so I do think you're seeing a lot of people in the ag school, for example, at Purdue and other places they're business people. They're people who think about, the use of the land in a different way. They're thinking about producing. So I think the need for education beyond high school for those who have an agriculture background is greater now than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Pop, this is Sean. Another aspect of the rural divide is that geography plays a huge role in where and when students go to college. So we know that if you have a college close by, you are much more likely to go. And that's borne out when we break it out geographically. And so, frankly, for a lot of our students across the state, they're a little bit further from local colleges. And I think that speaks to really the value of Ivy Tech in a lot of communities.
Yeah, can't get on
I also think that we have a gap in our K-12 system in regard to the capability of some of the rural schools to provide course credit kind of courses like you find in more of the suburban schools. So I think there's some issues there that we might need to tackle.
Great. Well, thank you all for those discussion points, and we'll be sure to follow up with you if you've asked a question about trends over the last slide. Next, Jake is going to talk about college success.
Yes, so we can go ahead and pivot from college access to college success. So one of the things that our college readiness report does a really great job, and one of the things we have access to in the data, is looking at how successful our students are once they enter higher education. So the first data point we have is persistence. We are able to see that 75% of our high school graduates persist to their second year of college. Then we're also able to see that the percentage of college-age students enrolling in Indiana public colleges who did not need remediation is at the lowest point ever, improving from 82% in 2014 to 91% not needing remediation in 2018. So that is a huge improvement in just 4 years. Finally, we have the last metric we have for college success is completing all attempted coursework, which is over half of 54% of 2017 high school graduates completed all attempted coursework in their first year of college. So we're seeing some great improvements in the students that are graduating from our high schools and going into college.
Yes, thanks, Jake. One new thing we've done with this report as well, and again, in alignment with the strategic plan, is we've taken the key takeaways and we've broken them down by completion, equity, and talent measures. So you will see that if you've looked in the report that we have split it out that way. It's just, I think, a different way to view these issues, and so that we know which ones we need to focus on when we have these discussions. So again, these are all, these next 3 slides are what we've basically been talking about already. The fewer Hoosiers are going to college, but more are choosing rigorous programs of study. So for example, science, technology, engineering, and math related, so STEM related programs, is the only program area that has grown in a year. And additionally, the diploma type still matters, as I discussed a few slides ago.
And as one of the pinnacles in our strategic plan, we also have equity, and it's shown in our readiness report that in Black, Hispanic, and students classified as others for race and ethnicity had a greater year-over-year GPA increase than their white and Asian counterparts. Their GPAs of lower income students also increased. So we're seeing huge increases in the success of students while they're in high school.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And Hoosier students are also succeeding, as we've mentioned, with the college success metrics, and they're also seeking various pathways to higher education. So not only are they needing less remediation, so they're better prepared. And again, you've heard the commissioner talk about this. It's a part of the strategic plan. This multiple pathways to a degree or credential. For example, students who are over three quarters or nearly three quarters of high school students, graduates, are pursuing a bachelor's degree. More than a quarter of students are pursuing an associate degree. And then the percent of those who are pursuing certificates has increased by more than 50% since 2012. So the pathways are getting broader. Additionally, students who earn early college credit in high school are more likely to go to college. Again, that's one of the ones you've heard us talk about as well. Okay.
Is there, hey guys, we're going to lose some of our people for our quorum. Do you think we could, is there anything here?
Skip the rest of it. I think
we're
great.
5 minutes to 4, and I know a couple people, so I think this is great data. Some of it we provided to you in various stages, so we're happy to follow up, but just try to keep a few of you here for our quorum for the votes. Yes. I think we're going to probably move on.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys. Sorry to cut you off, but you got through most everything, didn't you?
Yeah, it was the big hits.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good
Thanks.
information, great report.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good information there.
Great information.
And we're here to follow up if you have questions.
And I might add, very well presented. I loved all the graphs
and some encouraging information. Yeah.
Yes. So we have 4 academic degree programs for expedited action. Can I have a motion? Second.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That's passed. Now we'll go to Purdue West Lafayette Memorial Union ground floor renovation. And Susan Brock-Williams is going to give us a very brief presentation.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Susan Brock-Williams, Director of Government for Purdue. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is the Purdue Memorial Union ground renovation project, and we're excited about it. It's part of our 2018 Giant Leaps master plan in conjunction with all of the renovations we have been doing with our Union Hotel. And by the way, you can make a reservation there starting August 7th. Very excited about that. We received a $30 million gift from the and Beth White family, and then Dean and Barbara White Foundation. And so these changes go with that in terms of the dining options within the ground floor level of the Union. This is 67,600 gross square feet of space. We are also going to be doing some work in the Stewart Center, which is next door to the Union, to accommodate a new teen store concept that's currently in that space that would be all food court area once it's completed. This is a $47.3 million project. I have good news as since our last committee meeting discussing this issue, the Board of Trustees met today. So about an hour ago, I can release information that the payment for this project is somewhat different than we discussed. We talked about having it being paid out of auxiliary funds of $37.3 million and then operating funds of $10 million. But because we were able to strike an agreement with a third-party retail food service vendor, Aramark, they are going to put $25 million toward the project. Wow. So really, it's only $12 million that Purdue auxiliary funds would be paying for, and then the operating funds of 10. So that's really good news. It's a 10-year deal with 2 5-year renewal opportunities. So we are very excited about it. We hope to begin construction in August of this year, and we hope to be able to be having people in the space December of 2021. And I know you asked about changing the design of the space because of COVID. So we are in the early stages of that, of course, with design, but we are looking at that. We don't see any wholesale changes or huge changes being made, but we will be very cognizant of that. And we're very, I guess, pleased that this amount of space that's a gathering point for the university students and faculty will be coming offline for about 18 months. So it will help in terms of de-densifying the campus in the fall. Be happy to answer any questions.
You say Aramark is giving, is that a donation of 25 million?
No, it's not a donation. It's just part of the deal structure.
Well, how does that work?
Well, it's a well, they get access to all of our customers, of course.
Yeah.
So I don't know all of the details of the agreement, the contract itself, but I can get you that information if you'd like.
Well, I noticed that on the some of the suggestions from the state to save money, it says renovation should be paused. However, there are a lot of this is 30 million is gifted, so
right.
Can they use the gifted money first and then pause on the government money?
Well, the gifted money is for the Union Hotel renovation, so it's not necessarily for the retail dining part of the construction. It's a separate but related project.
Well, okay. So, are there any government funds going to be spent on the renovation in the near future, or is this going to be sort of financed by Aramark somehow, and then?
Well, yes, sorry, 25 million would be from Aramark, 10 million would be from our operating funds, and then about 12 million would be of the auxiliary account, which is monies that are generated through the housing and dining options on our campuses.
The profits from the students.
Right, those who pay to live and pay to eat on our campus.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, well, it doesn't look like there's any of the appropriation money that's going to be used, so I think it's okay. I just was kind of curious about the pause, Anyway, that's all I have.
Alexa, do you want to give the position of the staff, please?
Sure. The Purdue Memorial Union is a key destination on the West Lafayette campus. The project will enhance the facility, and as Susan said, it's also part of the 2018 Giant Leaps Master Plan. So staff recommends approval of this project.
Is there a motion? And a second?
Motion approved.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It's approved. Then we have two projects for two capital projects for expedited action. Hold on, I'm confused here. Do we have two or do we have five?
It's two, Mr. Chairman.
That's what I thought. Could we have a motion to approve those in a second, please?
So moved.
I'd make a motion for approval. Yep. Second.
All in, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Well, that passes as well. I think that completes. This has been an incredibly fruitful 3 hours, or however long we've been doing it. I guess it's 3 hours, and an enormous amount of work by the staff. Very, very impressive. And I want to thank all of my fellow commission members for stamina to go through this, but it's been incredibly valuable. And I wish everyone a safe and healthy summer and look forward to seeing everyone in August, or at least, I will learn how to use the video conferencing provided by Microsoft, which I never used before.
No, you won't.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate
Okay.
all of you. Thanks.
See ya.
Bye-bye.